Into session for the February 7th ZBA meeting in Wolfeboro. How are you all? Y'all came out in this weather. Good for you. Nice to see you. First, we'll take a roll call of the ZBA. Do you want to introduce yourself or?
Tim Cronin.
Yep. Audrey Klein,
Member.
Chair.
Sarah Soap, member.
Suzanne Ryan.
Luke Freudenberg.
And we have Tavis Austin, the town planner, with us. First on the agenda, we have a couple of people interested in sitting as alternates, and I'd like to have them come up and introduce themselves. Kate? Right up to the microphone, please. Yeah, he said he was going to. Nope. If you stand facing us on the other side, that's fine. Yep. This way the camera can pick you up. Is the microphone on?
Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. I think probably the best way to introduce myself is to just read the letter that I sent to the chair of the ZBA and the planning director and the town manager. I would like to be considered for membership on the Zoning Board of Adjustment, possibly as an alternate, serving to fill a vacancy until the next election of board members. Although I've not served previously in any elective office, my husband and I have lived in Wolfeboro for more than 30 years and have voted in every election. We both have a deep appreciation for the hospitable and responsible character of our town. My work and life experience includes a 20-year career as a high school guidance counselor in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Locally, I served for a few years on the board of the Friends of the Wolfeboro Library, where I did the fundraising for the annual Book and Author Luncheon, and also served for several years as a hospice volunteer. From 1998 to 2001, I was a reporter, photographer, and copy editor for the Granite State News, also AKA the Grunter, where I covered a variety of topics, including a few planning board meetings and other town events. That experience qualified me for a new job as editor of the Episcopal Diocese of New Hampshire diocesan paper, a job I held for 14 years. I see what a difference high-quality town government can make in the lives of local residents. I have the time to participate more fully, and it seems serving on the ZBA would be a really good fit for me. If you would like further information or references, I'd be pleased to furnish them. Sincerely.
Could you just state your name, please?
Yes, it's known as Kate McMahon. My name is Catherine E. McMahon.
Thank you. Kate, would you be willing to sit in the seat that expires in 2024?
Sure.
Great. I would like to appoint Kate McMullen to alternate seat number 4 on our chart, which expires in 2024. Thank you. You can go to the town clerk anytime that's convenient for you to be sworn in, and then you'll be a member, an alternate member. Thanks
Audrey,
for coming out.
You need a vote on that?
No, because empty seats just get filled until the next election. When the term expires, then the board votes to refill the seat.
The last meeting we had, there was a vote on the alternates coming in. Just wanted to check.
Not when I was here.
Okay.
We set? We also have a second voluntold, Charles Sumner. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Charles Sumner. My folks retired from Massachusetts up here 45 years ago. 25 years ago, I bought their home. 5 years ago, I retired and sold my house in Massachusetts and became a full-time resident up here. I've enjoyed my time up here. I've served on the CIP committee for 3 years now and enjoyed the work we do there. And when I learned that there was the possibility of serving on this committee, I put my hat in the ring to see if I could serve further. I retired as VP of Engineering for a small company down in Connecticut. I have technical skills, and I like to think I have a general business sense about me. So I think I could contribute a lot technically and business-wise to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just spell your name for the record?
Charles, C-H-A-R-L-E-S, Sumner, S-U-M-N-E-R.
And Charles, would you be willing to fill a seat that expires in 2023?
Yes, I would.
Great. I'd like to appoint Charles to alternate seat number 3, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Audrey, could you mention to them that they have to get sworn in by the,
Yes, I did to Kate, and Charles understands. Great. We have the first case, I believe we have a full board for. Would you like to read
Yep.
that case?
first case tonight is for Nicholas Canakas.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I'm going to step down for the duration of the evening.
Thank you. So Luke Freudenberg is stepping down, and I would like to seat our other alternate who is attending remotely, Sabette Stroman. She will be able to, when she speaks, you'll be able to hear her. She's on Tavis's laptop, and she can be remote per this section that perhaps Sarah will read to us.
Yes, as part of 91A-2 Roman numeral 3, a public body may, but is not required to allow one or more members of the body to participate in a meeting by electronic or other means of communication for the benefit of the public and the governing body, subject to the provisions of this paragraph. A member of the public body may participate in a meeting other than by attendance in person at the location of the meeting only when such attendance is not reasonably practical. Any reason that such attendance is not reasonably practical shall be stated in the minutes of the meeting. Except for an emergency, a quorum of the public body shall be physically present at the location specified in the meeting notice as the location of the meeting. For purposes of this subparagraph, an emergency means that immediate action is imperative and the physical presence of a quorum is not reasonably practical within the period of time requiring action. The determination that an emergency exists shall be made by the chairman or presiding officer of the public body, and the facts upon which that determination is based shall be included in the minutes of the meeting.
Yep. Sabette, can you state why you are attending remotely tonight? This is also a technical test. Yes.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I'm out of town, obviously, and I have a health issue. I'm happy to send in my doctor report.
I didn't mean for you to be personal about it, but you are not available because you're out of town, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the room with you?
Oh, no.
Okay, great. I think we're ready to read our first case.
First case, Nicholas Canakas, South Main Street, tax map lot number 260-90, case number 02-SE-22, special exception for the construction of a single-family dwelling on a lot with no frontage. Formal submission at this public hearing. We had a 4 o'clock meeting with attendees of myself, Tim Cronin, Suzanne Ryan, Sarah Silk, Chuck Sumner, who was appointed tonight, and Luke was not at that one.
I was absent as well. I did manage to look up the snowy, slippery driveway, but that's as close as I got.
Audrey, I have the minutes for the ZBA site visit that took place at 4 p.m. for Nicholas Canakas, tax map and lot 260-90, case 02-SE-22. And as stated, ZBA members present was Suzanne Ryan, myself, and Tim Cronin. Audrey Klein excused. Dave Senecal excused. Also present, Nick Canakas, Alden Moore, Bob Flannery, Charles Sumner. It took place at 4 p.m. Stakes were pointed out for the location. A brief explanation was about shared use of the driveway since about 1959. It is believed there is town water. A septic plan existed but expired. and that will go in the file.
Thank you, Sarah. So this application is for a special exception under Wolfeboro's ordinances. And for special exception, the ZBA hears a number of appeals, a variance, a special exception, administrative appeal, and each of one of those processes, we are required to look at a certain different set of criteria as we're judging that. So the special exception criteria come out of our zoning ordinance, and there are, how many of them? Quite a few. There are 7 special criteria items that need to be met in order for us to approve that. So the applicant or the applicant's representative will make their presentation, and we will then ask them questions that we need to find out facts and find out whether they meet these 7 criteria. People in favor can talk, and then people opposed would be invited to talk, and then we'll have a discussion amongst the board and probably make a decision this evening if everything's in order. And who are you?
Could I, excuse me?
Yeah.
Could I ask the town planner if he feels the application has the necessary documents to proceed?
When the application was first received, I commented to Mr. Canakas that there were a couple of items that I saw missing. One was an answer to G, which is the site plan, and the other was evidence of the deeded right-of-way having been conveyed from the original property to the current. My understanding, and I think the representative that's here tonight can speak to it, but what you have in front of you is the deed record. What's coming up is, for those that aren't aware, the New Hampshire statute precludes issuance of a building permit on a lot that does not have frontage. That's 67441 if you get bored or can't fall asleep later tonight. One of the things the town did in response to 67441 was adopt section 175-55.1, lots with no frontage. So it's a mechanism to allow the town, upon application for a special exception, to allow someone with deeded access to an existing lot prior to 67441, which was 1983, in order to build on their property. That is really a 30,000-foot view of that, but that's what's going on.
Thank you.
tonight.
And the presenter?
Nick? Oh.
Oh, sorry.
Did we get the acknowledgement that's required under number 6?
In an email dated January 31st, they address number 5, but not number 6. Is number 5 what you're speaking to?
I don't have it in my packet, but
So the only additional information is as to question number 5 on the submission. The site plan proposes a single-family dwelling with access via the existing driveway. Parking will be in a garage to be built. Traffic circulation will be minimal and consistent with single-family homes. There is sufficient open space on the property to meet setback requirements for the residential zone. No fencing or signage is proposed. The proposed use is residential, so there will not be commercial vehicles beyond the construction of the proposed residence, and lighting impact will be minimal as consistent with a single-family home. That was the piece that was missing in the original submittal.
Do we have that in our packet? We have one copy?
I have one copy.
It's in an email.
and
That came in after the packet went out.
and one other thing, if I may.
Yes.
When this was adopted, I was around, and we had a few cases that have come before us. And I went into my archives and found this state statute, which I passed out to you folks. And it's not to say we can't go forward, but this state statute supersedes, takes priority over the town ordinance. It says 674-41-2 allows the zoning board of adjustments to grant an exception when a property owner wants to build on a lot that has no frontage on a class highway and no frontage on any road approved by the planning board or other board prior to platting jurisdiction. For example, a lot whose only frontage is on a private road not shown on any plat approved by the board. The statute must be read carefully because even though an exception is possible, the standards the owner must meet are quite stringent. To grant the exception and allow the building to be erected, the ZBA must find all of the following: that the enforcement of a minimum frontage requirement of 674-41 would entail practical difficulty and unnecessary hardship, and the circumstances of the case do not require the building structure or part thereof to be related to the existing or proposed street, and the erection of the building will not distort the official map, and that's not applicable. We don't have one. The erection of the building will not cause hardship to future purchases under financial impact on the municipality. This came from a hard road travel document that we use for roads. Zoning ordinance exception. It does not matter if the standard for a special exception in the local zoning ordinance are different from the 4 standards listed above. The zoning special exception does not apply. An exception under 674-41 has nothing to do with a special exception under zoning. Paragraph 3 RSA 674-41 provides that this law supersedes any less stringent local ordinance. So I think as a minimum, it would have to meet these 3 bullets and our ordinance.
Can I just ask a somewhat technical question? Do they recognize a difference between a street and a driveway? Access via a street or a driveway?
No, 674-41 refers to public way, which would be a street, not a driveway.
I don't follow your question because the purpose of the application is for a lot with no frontage, whether it be a driveway or a street. It's just no frontage. A driveway doesn't count as frontage on a road.
Right, that's why the town adopted 175-55.1 in 2014.
So,
Because there are a number of lots in Wolfeboro that have...
talking to your...
There are a number of lots in town that do not have frontage. So the planning board and the town voted March 11, 2014, Article 4, to put in 175-55.1 to allow lots with no frontage under 674-41 to have access. It's rather specific in that it requires that it be a lot created prior to 674-41 with the deeded access. Subject then, or able to then obtain or request a special exception.
So you just said that that is for lots created before 674-41, but that kind of negates the difference between a street and a driveway.
The difference between a street and a driveway is not the question. 674-41 deals with public way. And when they refer to street and way, it's the same thing. It's not a driveway. So
Okay.
This would be a special, what's requested this evening is a special exception to allow a lot that was created before 674-41 to have access via a deeded right-of-way. A deeded right-of-way created prior to 674-41 to meet the intent and purpose. Otherwise, there are lots that have essentially no value.
So the deeded right-of-way is not a street, it's
Correct.
a driveway.
In fact, if you look at the language that came in tonight, it's the right to pass over. It's even less formal than a right-of-way.
Do you have any comments to that? This is the 67441. You often see parcels like on Class 6 roads going to the selectmen. Is that what this generally is used for?
Yes. Development on a Class 6 road, development on anything less than a Class 5 road, quite honestly.
Right.
Or a private road that's shown on the subdivision plat, i.e. the adopted roadmap of the town.
I think what he read is correct.
And if the board wants to think about it, you could continue to, open the hearing and continue to a day specific and check with your legal counsel to see if the appropriate references are in 175-55.1.
Yes, we could do that. I think we should hear the case in any case. And if we come to have that question, we can continue it until we get some counsel on it.
Okay.
Is there anything else, anybody else on the board?
Clear.
Hi. You'll have to pull it up, pull the mic, raise the mic or something, or squat. I think raising the mic's probably easier. Closer?
There you go.
We criteria for you, then answer any questions that you may have. So first, site suitability. There's adequate usable space for a single-family house on this lot. It leaves about room for a 4,500 square foot residence while meeting the setback and lot coverage requirements. Access will be via the driveway used in the site walk that's also used for the adjacent landlocked property. If you will take a look at the packet I gave you in lot 91, oh, I apologize, lot 89, there is a title policy which most cleanly states the right-of-way. It'll be item 7B on the second page of the title policy. That is the right-of-way previously granted to Charles Grant and his heirs over the southerly portion of the subject premises is reserved for the use of the heirs and assigns of said Charles Grant. And if you'd like to dig through the packet of deeds that I gave you, you'd see that lot 90 and 91 were formerly both owned by Charles Grant, eventually conveyed to Raymond French, who conveyed them out separately, reserving the right-of-way in both of those lots. So the access to lot 91 that we saw on the site walk is the same right-of-way that we would be using on this property. And again, based on sidewalk, you'd see there's no steep slopes concerns, no floodplains. It's a very buildable lot. There'll be no negative neighborhood impact with the single-family lot. It's in the residential zone, and it's consistent with the encouraged use for that area. There will be no nuisance or hazard to traffic. The right-of-way is already in use and will actually be improved once this law is developed, as the large boulder, which poses a bit of a challenge right now, will be removed by the developer. Again, for availability of public services and facilities, this will be served by the same utilities as the surrounding properties. They're adequate for the area. Rather than sewer, it will be on a septic system. The septic system was previously approved, but has expired and will have to be renewed. The developer's in the process of receiving that renewal. And then this was added in the an email to Tavis you have in your packet. So I'll pass over 5. That's already been read into the record. In item 6, immediate neighborhood integrity. The use will be, again, consistent with the neighborhood. It's a single-family residence going into the residential district. It's the intended use for this zone. The impact on property values will be positive. Development typically increases property values. And the proposed structure is consistent with the ordinance and the intent of the master plan, which states that the goal is creating opportunities to allow development of a more diverse housing stock, which home ownership and rentals for people of all ages and income levels. I think adding more housing into Wolfeboro will see to this goal. If the board has any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer them.
How long has the septic system been expired?
The approval was in November of 1983.
And do you know whether there's any significant changes in the septic design regulations that would impact where it can be placed on this lot, even as a renewal?
I don't believe so. I have the developers who have been in contact with their new septic engineer who may be able to shed more light on that.
My only concern would be whether it was going to be eating into the buildable area, you know, for a average size house, but
I believe there's a rough sketch in your packet that has the septic area.
oh, is that what that is? No, that says garage located on already, I kind of don't understand the drawing, but
It's-
garage located on area already filled. But that
Yeah, it's a
doesn't,
very rough sketch, but in the top left corner of the lot, it has a septic area.
I see the word septic.
Right, that's about all we have.
Oh, okay.
Right now, the main holdup is seeing if the lot is able to be buildable, and then more full-fledged plans will be fleshed out when it gets to the planning stage.
That would be up to the planning board. If
Probably
we-
the building
if we-
inspector.
Yeah, if we give the special exception and then they go to plan, the building
Yeah.
department is going to say, yes, it can be done, or no, it can't.
Could I just ask you a quick clarification on this little drawing?
Yes,
This is all the lot next door,
right,
and this is the one that you're addressing.
correct.
And in our paperwork that we got, you have referred to it as single-family, and yet in several places here, in answer to question number 1, it's a 1 or 2 family dwelling, and then you go down to question number 2, and it's also noted on the application as a 1 or 2 family dwelling. Is it 1 or is it 2?
It will be one.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to check on that.
I have a question. It says approximate location to rebuild a duplex. Are we talking about,
Right, that lot's not being developed.
it's what?
This lot is not being redeveloped.
And what is that about the, don't have to blast much?
Oh, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
And that, huh?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, and there's another note, something to do with the garage located on the area already filled, but don't have to blast much. This plan is confusing.
I believe it's an older plan from when this was, the lot next door was previously a duplex. There's- So the garage would be under the house. I believe the note's just that it already has fill there that would be easy to remove in order to implement the garage.
This is the house we saw today that already exists, and what we're talking about, this one, it's kind
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I have another quick question. As part of that 175-55-1, C1, it says review and comment by the planning board. Do we have that in writing from minutes or something from the planning board?
No, the planning board just met last Tuesday. The minutes aren't yet completed. I can represent for the board. They had a memo that looked just like this. It's just the section of 155-55-1, calling out where the planning board needs to review and comment before the zoning board can act. Mike Hodder is the only one with comments, and he was concerned about numbers 4 and 5. That would be 175-55-1C, 4 and 5. 4 is proof of applicant's deeded right of access, and 5 is driveway access approved by essentially Public Works. So, zoning board of adjustment. I mentioned to the board that the driveway that would be accessed is already there on 28. And I mentioned that the applicant was working on the deeded right-of-way. So I believe 4 and 5 have been, those are the only comments by the planning board. I'll leave it that way.
Does this driveway also serve Lot 89?
Sorry, let me just get my map again.
91.
No, 89
I know it
has a separate
serves
driveway.
91. Does it come off of South Main Street and serve 89, or do they have a separate driveway?
They have a separate shared driveway with 88.
Okay. So it only serves,
Right now,
90
just
and 91.
91. Right.
is there plans to have it serve more, or?
No, just those
Okay.
two.
Any other questions or comments, or do you need to look at the paperwork further? Sabat?
No, I'm done.
Thank you. Yes.
Under the 75-55-1C, there is a 6 and...
Can't understand you with your mask on, sorry.
Sorry. Under 175-55-1C, 6 and 7, they refer to applicant shall endorse the town's acknowledgement regarding issuance of a building permit on a private way, and also another form. Will there be something supplied to the town that acknowledges those two items and satisfies them?
Begging the board's forgiveness, I have been unable to find any copy of those two specific documents that are quoted in the regulations. My suggestion is that should the board move to approve the special exception tonight, you put a condition of approval that the applicant shall work with the town and town legal counsel to establish the appropriate document to achieve 6 and 7.
And that would be...
It functionally would end up being a deed restriction of the property.
So that would be your recommended condition number 5?
Yes.
Thank you.
If you wanted to spread them out, it could be 5 and 6, or it could just be one covering both.
And I'm all for that, and I think the question that I have, that I hope to be answered through that process, is a driveway a private way, or is a private way a private street? But as you go through that process, I think we'll be able to determine that for the future.
Where it becomes interesting is Wolfeboro allows 3 single-family homes off of a driveway. Most communities only allow 2 off of a driveway, and then it becomes a private road after that.
And that may or may not match up with what the fire department would like to see.
Correct.
Okay.
That's come to light recently, yes.
Okay.
And we've established there's only 2
Yes,
on this.
There's only
particular
2,
thing.
right.
Correct, yeah, okay.
Suzanne, do you want to propose that we postpone this until next month so that we can get the answer to the question you had about 67441?
Yeah, I think we continue the
Audrey?
meeting.
Or do you want to? Yeah.
Have you opened the public hearing?
Oh, right, sorry. The public hearing is open, but we might like to hear from other people. If anybody else would like to speak in favor of this application? Would anybody like to speak in opposition to this application? I guess the answer is no. So,
Yes, I'd like to continue the meeting to have a clear understanding of street, way, private drive.
do you have anything else to add before we close the public hearing and deliberate on that?
I'm not sure if this would clear up your question. In section Roman numeral 3 of 67441, as for purposes of paragraph 1, the street giving access to the lot means a street or way abutting the lot and upon which the lot has frontage. It does not include a street from which the sole access to the lot is via private easement or right-of-way unless such easement or right-of-way also meets the criteria set forth in subparagraphs 1, A, B, C, D, or E. Would that clarify for you?
I don't think we have a clear understanding of that.
I see what you mean. It's not clear to me either. It seems to send it back to A, if approved by the board.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to continue.
Oh, hang on.
It's referring you back to subparagraph
1A.
which is back on the other page, and that goes A, B, C, D, or E.
I'd like for our council to be able to decipher this.
Okay, so I want to close the public hearing then. Yes.
If you're going to continue to a date specific, don't close the public hearing.
Oh, right. Thank you. Again. Can't close the public hearing if we're going to continue to a date certain.
Shouldn't we have a vote on that?
Yes, we do. Somebody's got to make a motion. She's working on it.
So did you close it?
No, we're going to leave the public hearing open.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So they can comment on what we find.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion to continue until our next regular scheduled meeting
March
here at the
14th.
town hall.
March
I
14th.
think it's the 13th, is it the 14th?
March 14th. Do I have a second?
Yes.
All
And
in-
this is for the purpose of consulting with,
Yes.
this is for the purpose of consulting with town attorney.
Great. Was that an amendment to the motion?
What's that?
I just amended it to say the purpose was to consult.
Oh,
with-
yeah, sure, yeah.
So it's a motion to continue the public hearing to March 14th in order to get counsel on the differences in correlation between 674.41 and 175.55.1.
And Sarah, did you second?
Yes.
All in favor? Kim?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye. Aye. Nay.
No.
And Sabet? 4. Okay. Thank you. We will see you back in March. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a minute while the board looks for some water.
This one here?
Yeah, where do you want to sit? Yeah, it's really low tonight. I don't know why. It's the setting. Change my seat. She's going to sit over here so she can hear better. So when we speak, we shouldn't be wearing, we should take our mask off. Yeah, okay. Tim, would you please read the next case?
Next case is Luke Freudenberg / Millwork Place LLC, 15 Willow Street, tax map 204-017 and 204-015, case number 03-V-22, public hearing for a variance under Article 23, Section 175-145 A and B of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance for a unit density per acre and number of units per building for workforce housing development. Site visit was attended today from the board. Our board was myself, Tim Cronin, Suzanne Ryan, Sarah Silk, and Chuck Sumner, who was just appointed tonight, but he'll be on board with us after the next.
I had visited the site prior to 4 o'clock.
Luke Freudenberg, Millwood Place, LLC, tax map and lot 2-4-017 and 204-015, case 03B22.
These are the minutes of the site visit, just
Yes,
to be
sorry.
clear. Okay.
175-145 A and B, it was 4:30 PM. ZBA present was Suzanne Ryan, Sarah Silk, Tim Cronin. Audrey Klein was excused. She viewed it earlier. Dave Senical was excused. Tavis, could you please add Charles Sumner's name to those present? Thank you. Luke Freudenberg, Roger Murray, Jim Degnan, Catherine Burke, and Darren Cowan were also present. Stakes were pointed out off the end of Willow Street. The corners of 2 buildings were marked. The group went to the area near a blacksmith printing, and Luke pointed out the 4 stakes for that building footprint. Interested parties asked several questions and were encouraged to attend the meeting for clarification.
So this is a variance, one of the appeals that are heard by the ZBA, and we judge a variance by some pretty narrow regulations that are dictated by the state. Tavis is going to pass out the regulations for a variance in case anybody would like to follow along. I'll just read quickly through it. A variance is permission granted to use a specific piece of property in a manner otherwise illegal in the ordinance. The 5 criteria must be met in order for the ZBA to approve a variance. The Zoning Board of Adjustment shall have the power to approve if the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, the spirit of the ordinance is observed, substantial justice is done, the values of surrounding properties are not diminished, and literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. For the purposes of subparagraph IA to E, the unnecessary hardship means that owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. So when we hear we open up to hear the facts and the information about the case so that we can make a legal and reasonable decision after we determine which of those facts we can apply these criteria to.
The current plan of 12622 has complied with 7 of the 13 requested items on the ZBA variance application checklist. The remaining 6 are partially addressed. D, right-of-way shown, but questions still remain. E, non-applicable except for the drainage easement, if any. G, distance between buildings on Lot 1. H is okay except all setbacks are not shown. J, parking. L, non-applicable except for snow storage. And cause to grant a waiver has not been shown by the applicant, but this plan is much more improved with more information, and I think the questions that will follow will alleviate some of those concerns. I would move not to grant a blanket waiver and proceed to open the public, have the chairman proceed to open the public hearing.
Any comments from the board on that? Okay. All right, I do open the public hearing. I'd like to hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Luke Freudenberg, 68 Center Street here in Wolfeboro, and the applicant. I'm going to go a quick opening on the project, and then I'll immediately go into the 5 criteria. When we started out this project and came up with the idea of offering workforce housing on this lot, we knew that there would be a lot of discussion. We also knew that in the end, people would line up on both sides of the issue. We sought early on to put the idea out on social media in order to broaden the discussion. Throughout this process, we have sought transparency and openness. Some may say that we've gone above and beyond to seek input. What we had hoped from government and this board was the same transparency that we entered into this with. However, this is not the case. This board is set, unfortunately, I'm subverting our message, and to make this not about workforce housing, but the applicants themselves. This board has sat in secret meetings on this application behind closed doors. The chair has had open communication in which she has challenged the planner's ability to perform his job and with one of the applicants. Members have sent email to town staff prior to the application being formally filed, asking if there was water and sewer capacity. 23rd-hour memos have been drafted by staff, and it appears we are now at the brink of another water and sewer capacity issue. A new board member was added at the last meeting who has made public statements against the project. Everyone should be heard on this issue, and everyone has the chances to have their voices heard. We, the applicants, believe and feel that there is an effort by some to undermine this project. Our case should have been heard at the last meeting after it was considered complete by the town. Instead, we, the applicants, were made to look as though we were wrong. And when this very board knows full well that they had an obligation to hear this case in January. Tonight, you will hear some more legal maneuvering. You will hear for some that say how great it is that we are offering workforce housing, but this is the wrong location. The fact is that they didn't want this anywhere, and that is just an easy excuse. You will see organizations represented by lawyers and committees who have had charrettes talk about the need for workforce housing. What you will not see tonight is the over 100 applications that we had sign up within hours after posting this facility on a website. They are not here tonight, more likely because they are probably out working or raising a family. And as such, their voices can't be heard tonight. So that's where me and my partners come in. We are here to set the record straight. We seek a variance from Article 175, Section 145 of the zoning ordinance regarding the unit per density in this zone to permit workforce housing development of 50 units on 3.70 acres at 15 and 17 Willow Street in Wolfeboro, formerly known as the Berry Mill. Working in collaboration with the New Hampshire Housing Authority, 70% of these units would be held at affordable rates currently prescribed under RSA. Currently, due to the zoning ordinance, this lot only supports 19 units, but the use is allowed in this zone. Thus, our argument for a variance centers slowly around the fact that the use is allowed, and due to the area or size constraints of the parcel, we are unique, and thus we should be allowed a variance that would allow for the construction of 50 workforce housing units. 1, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest because, as evidenced by the recent charrette the town of Wolfeboro just undertook, workforce housing is urgent, if not a critical need in Wolfeboro. This project, the former Berry Mill, would provide 50 units, of which 70% of those units would be classified and fall under workforce housing. Wolfeboro has seen no other project, including Harriman Hill, reach that threshold of units being listed as affordable. Recent real estate listings for 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, provided as example A, clearly show that affordable units are currently difficult, if not near impossible, to find in the Wolfeboro area. This parcel has sat dormant since the 1980s. It boasts 2 lots totaling 3.70 acres, about twice the size of a Manhattan city block. It is accessible from Willow Street and Center Street and is on town water and sewer. It should also be noted that this type of activity is exactly what the master plan of Wolfeboro strives to implement. The property is close to many of the resources that Wolfeboro offers and is on the Bridge Falls path, making it ideal for those who work in town and do not have transportation. It is within 1/2 mile of the area hospital and on the fire hydrant system. Thus, this project is not contrary to the public interest and can be inherently seen as one of the major goals of the master plan. Due to the size of the lot area, it does not meet the current criteria as set forth in Wolfeboro zoning and will exceed the maximum of 6 units per acre. This parcel is also unique in that it contains significant ledge, and thus such a development undertaking would not be economically sustainable if we were only able to build 19 units the current zoning permits. 2, the spirit of the ordinance is observed because the spirit of the ordinance is observed when balanced against the intent of the master plan and further maintained since the density provision was specifically never intended to be applied in the master plan to workforce housing. This site and the development thereof will require a large infrastructure investment which cannot be sustained by 19 units, which is currently permittable. Case in point is the City of Portsmouth versus Boca, 151 New Hampshire 8591-2, 855A.2D, 2004. Here, a landowner in Portsmouth sought to construct a 100-room hotel. The petitioners, abutting landowners, argued that the landowner could not meet the necessary hardship test because a 60-room hotel could be constructed instead of a 100-room hotel, eliminating the need for a variance. However, the Superior Court determined under the simplex rule, a 100-room hotel is not unreasonable just because a 60-room hotel could be built without the requirement of a variance. If for just this reason, we believe we meet the spirit of the ordinance. However, it can further be argued that the ordinance limiting the density per acre to 6 units was specifically never intended to prevent workforce housing units, but rather large commercial condominium complexes that have much less perceived value when it comes to the public's interest. In 2008, the New Hampshire legislature passed a law that requires every community to provide reasonable and realistic opportunities for the development of workforce housing. New Hampshire's workforce housing statute, New Hampshire RSA 674:58 through 61, the statute defines workforce housing and what is considered affordable. New Hampshire is not a home rule state, which means all municipal powers are derived from legislative grant, RSA 672:1-3-E, and defines affordable to low and moderate income households shall not be prohibited or discouraged by the use of municipal planning and zoning powers or by unreasonable interpretation of such powers. Again, shall not be prohibited or discouraged by the use of municipal planning and zoning powers. The New Hampshire Supreme Court ruled in Britain versus the town of Chester, 134 New Hampshire, 434, 1991, that municipalities are obliged to provide households with a reasonable opportunity to obtain affordable housing, and that municipality zoning cannot be used to prevent outsiders from any disadvantage or socioeconomic group from moving there. 3, substantial justice is done because, according to the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, while the Granite State has made inroads, there is still a housing deficit, and as many 20,000 units are needed. Among the greatest need is affordable housing, also called workforce housing, which includes starter homes, townhouses, condominiums, apartments, and accessory dwellings. While inclusive of all low-income housing, workforce housing is defined as affordable to a renter earning up to 60% of the area's median income, a salary range that includes many essential workers. The New Hampshire Supreme Court has consistently ruled that substantial justice is attained when the benefits from a variance outweigh any burdens. We have already shown this. We have already shown that is a public need and not simply a want. We have already outlined above how this variance is not contrary to the public interest and how it observes the spirit of the ordinance. It can further be argued that development would achieve a major goal of the town's planning intentions, and 2, creates a development that better complements the surrounding neighborhoods. Thus, both in area and in general, the town benefits from granting this variance, and the result would be substantial justice. 4, the values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished because numerous studies have been conducted to examine the impacts of affordable housing on property values in a wide variety of circumstances. Several researchers have surveyed the landscape, inventorying and taking a critical look at the body of work that has been accumulated over the past and several decades. The Center for Housing Policy states, to summarize the summaries, most studies have found that affordable housing does not depress neighboring property values and may even raise them in some cases. Overall, the research suggests that neighbors should have little to fear from the type of attractive and moderately sized developments that constitute the bulk of newly produced affordable housing today. Jeff Leary's 1999 literature survey from the California Redevelopment Association examined 31 separate studies. 7 studies documented positive effects of affordable housing on the surrounding property values, while 19 found no effect. Negative effects were found in 1 study, while 3 studies were inconclusive. The North Carolina Coalition, a state civic group, compiled a catalog circa 2002 of 36 studies, mostly dating from the mid-1990s to early 2000s. In that, the vast majority found no impact on surrounding property values. Several found positive effects, and only 1 found one possible negative effect. Trulia, an online residential real estate site, recently conducted a survey indicating that low-income housing tax credits projects have no impact on values of nearby properties. According to the Trulia study, there was no significant effect from 1996 to 2006 on homes valued near a study. The Center for Housing Policy has outlined key facets that I wish to also discuss here. As working with the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority on this project, we will meet or exceed all the following when it comes to the proposed location at the former Berry Mill property. Design. Affordable housing that is attractively designed and blends with the surrounding neighborhood may be more likely to have no effect or even a positive effect on nearby property values. An attractive design may also be helpful in allaying community concerns about the aesthetics of a proposed development. Our development will seek to blend with the surrounding community. We will also seek to enhance the beauty of the property with vibrant green spaces, a strategic cleanup of the existing structure, and the spillway associated with it. Management. Not surprisingly, poorly maintained housing, whether privately or publicly owned, has been shown to depress nearby property values. Affordable housing that is well maintained and well managed is more likely to have a neutral or even positive effect on the surrounding properties. The New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority requires that developers use a state-approved management company. This takes all the guesswork out of the equation. Revitalization. Rehabilitation of distressed properties for affordable housing has proven beneficial to neighboring home values. Neighbors are more likely to view quality, affordable housing as preferable to vacant lots or dilapidated buildings. For over 40 years, this property sat dormant in the area of town that was once vibrant. When it operated, the Berry Mill provided over 200 jobs in Wolfeboro. This development offers this property a chance to once again come to life. Strong neighborhoods. As long as it's not overly concentrated, locating affordable housing developments in strong neighborhoods with high home values and low poverty rates is unlikely to have an adverse effect on the nearby property values. These findings provide support for the emerging trend towards mixed income housing and communities. As you will see below, and as I will read, this property is surrounded by other apartment buildings and is close to many of the shops and commercial businesses here in town. This development will only bolster the area and the neighborhood. The current abutters consist of the following. 82 Center Street has commercial on the first floor and 4 apartments making up the second and third floor, on a total of 0.21 acres of land. 90 Center Street has 2 commercial units on the first floor, 1 apartment on the second floor, on 0.17 acres of land. 94 Center Street has 2 commercial units on the first floor and 2 apartments on the second floor, on 1/10 of an acre of land. 96 Center Street is currently a 3-unit apartment building on 0.27 acres of land, and 11 Willow Street is a 5-unit apartment building on 0.29 acres of land. Literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship because the special conditions of this property, as distinguished from other properties, are as follows. Why is this property different from other properties in the area? As outlined above, the 5 properties that abut this property are all apartment buildings. All these properties fall on lots less than half an acre in size. 11 Willow Street is on less than 3/10 of an acre with 5 units. The former Berry Mill property, 15 and 17 Willow Street, is 3.70 acres of land. This lot is one of the largest lots in the area and can support the very development we are proposing. The lot is on Back Bay and dissected by the Smith River. The land has significant ledge and wetlands restrictions, which will make development more difficult. It is not only shielded by Back Bay on one side, but also by the Bridge Falls Path, which gives privacy and will buffer it from neighboring properties. From 1895 to the late 1970s, this land was occupied by the Berry Mill, so it has seen its share of industry. The land also boasts 2 ways of vehicle traffic coming and going from the property. Willow Street is one access point along with Center Street. This land is unique in that it also has water and sewer infrastructure available to it. It is also unique in that workforce housing is close enough to downtown corridor, which allows for foot traffic via the sidewalks, as well as being located around the Bridge Falls Path. Literal enforcement would prevent this project from moving forward, as it would limit this project to 19 units, which is not sustainable for infrastructure costs that need to be expended to develop this property. A, owning to the special conditions of the property set forth above that distinguish it from other properties, and no fair and substantial relationship exists between the purpose of the ordinance applicable to the application and the specific application of that provision to the property, because this ordinance was never intended to prevent workforce housing. If that were the intent of density requirement, it would have made the language much more clear. If you need further evidence how I can make such a claim, you need to look forward to Wolfeboro's own master plan. The proposed use is reasonable. Remember, in 2008, the New Hampshire legislature passed a law that requires every community to provide reasonable and realistic opportunities for the development of workforce housing. That very fact is why this type of use is allowed at this property, and thus we are left with a lack of acreage to meet the density requirement for 50 units. If strict conformance is required, this project cannot be sustained at 19 units, and thus the entire project collapses. 50 units allows the development to not only be economically viable, but a project to develop this would be economically sustainable at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Let us gather our thoughts for a minute here.
You going to take board members' questions?
Yeah. I just make sure everybody's,
Could I address probably as I say, the elephant in the room? Could you please tell me what you used, or what the formula was for net density for the land and residential density? We do have an ordinance that depicts how you scientifically determine the net density.
Are you asking for the density that we chose as 50? Or are you asking for how I came to 19 units for the property?
That's not what I'm talking about. A mathematical formula that is intended to represent the build-out density of the tract of land using conventional development practices. Net density equals total tract square footage, square foot area of very poorly drained soils, square foot area of slopes greater than 15 to 20% of the square foot area of the remaining land, representing area necessary for conventional road construction and right-of-way. Minimum lot size established by the underlying zoning district. Total area, very poorly drained soils, slopes 15%, 20% remaining area, minimum lot size zoning district. So
Thank you.
what is the formula that
Thank
you
you.
used?
Okay, I'll answer the question. I believe that your question falls outside of the purview of this board with regard to a density variance that you seek. I will answer the question, but I want to state that for the record.
Well, it is the town's zoning ordinance. The question here tonight is density, and there is a formula used by the town for net density, and it's not outside of this board's question.
So the density per acre in that zone is 6 units per acre. At the tax card shows 4.01 acres, which would allow us to build 24 units on the property under current zoning. However, in the current plan that we had drawn up, it's 3.70 acres, so 19 units is how I come to the math on that.
3.70 or 3.07?
3.70.
I think our question, we might have to take that under advisement. I don't know how that section applies, and
Well, because it's a calculation as
Right.
to they extrapolate out the wetlands, they extrapolate out the easements or driveways or
I understand what the wording is, but
well, we don't have anything that demonstrates that.
right,
So that's a question to
and I don't know if it applies.
I just need to go back to one question. Luke, you said on multiple occasions during the reading it was 3.07 and 19 units. If it's 3.7, that comes out to 22, so which one is it?
It's 3.70 on the plans that were just drawn up.
Yeah, 3.7, the 2 and the 1.7. Yeah,
Which makes 22.
Right, not 19.
okay.
Going back to the earlier question, I believe net development density applies only in a conservation subdivision. It is a term defined in the regulations, but that's not what's requested here.
Well, it's a standard practice used by engineers and surveyors as to how to figure what the density will be. It's a universal type thing. And then the other part of that question is how did they calculate the residential density? I mean, I know there's a way. I'd like to hear it explained from the applicant.
You mean, how did they calculate the 22 units?
Yes, how many one-bedrooms, how many people within the units? I haven't heard any of that.
Sarah?
Yes, I just want to double-check something with Luke. Currently, these are two separate lots, and you refer to it frequently as one lot. So the intention here, and I don't believe I saw it in the application, but it might be there, is that these two lots will be permanently joined as to one lot, because that does change the density that you're allowed.
That is correct, yes. The lots will be merged.
And so we've gone from 70 units down to 50 units, and then you were just talking about 22 units. What are the number of units you're going to put in here?
50 units is what we were asking for. What we believe would be allowed with just a building permit and site plan review would be the 22 units that Tavis just spoke about.
That would be allowed under the ordinance without any special approvals, 22 units. How did you find your magic number of 50, 50 units from the balance of the cost expense standpoint, which is one of your more important points of why you need or are seeking a variance? How did you come up with that number?
Sure. So originally, when we were asking for the 70 units, it was 4 buildings. After meeting with the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority numerous times and having numerous meetings, we came up with the 70 units. However, after our meeting in January and the fact that we have been very open in communicating throughout this process, we kept hearing over and over again from the public that with the traffic and with the amount of units, it was that was the main pushback we heard. And so we went back after that meeting, reduced it by 1 building, which lowered the costs, for the project, and also it still holds the equation good enough for the Housing Finance Authority to work with us on this. So the 50 units is the number we came up with. That's what we'd be looking for. Beyond that answer, it's I don't think it's a big strain personally, but I know there's other members of the public here that are going to speak to it. So that's where we came up with it, working with the Finance and Housing Authority and reducing it by 1 building since the last application.
Do you have other questions? I'm going to go in a different direction, so.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Could you report to us what the technical review commission had to say regarding this proposal when you went before them,
Sure. I have the form right here.
their recommendations or what have you?
Can we have copies of those? But they're from a committee, so.
So I have the review form right here. I have an extra copy.
Sure. I'd like it maybe to be copied for everybody. So for the audience, the Technical Review Committee is a committee of department heads that review for technical issues that affect their department early on in the project stages, so that the developer has some heads up to any issues that the department heads might see.
So the form, staff reviewer, Barry Muccio, Town of Wolfeboro Electric Department, attended. I have a recommended approval, check mark next to that. Tavis Austin, town planner, no check marks, but he made a comment on there. Dave Ford, Public Works Director, do not recommend for 70 units, noting for information on the form, okay for 24 units. Traffic, major problem, or traffic, that's what it looks like in the handwriting there, but no indication about water or sewer on that form. Tom Zotti, fire, do not recommend, further review, info needed. And then it was noted on the back page, water and sewer connection fees. was noted. Traffic study, major concern about increased traffic in the Wolfeboro Falls. Upgrades to Willow Street that would be required. Dam needs a plan. Upgrade eyesore. Barry Muccio, 70 units, 24 allowable without variance. Electric capacity is available to serve units. Tom Zotti, acres, 2 parcels, max 70 units. Apparatus access was noted. Building code, fire code issues. Tavis Austin, town planner, water sewer access, traffic, New Hampshire DOT. That's the form that was.
Were these all the pages? It seemed like I couldn't see where you were reading from. Oh, thank you.
For the benefit of the public, the Technical Review Committee is the meeting that is required by the site plan regulation. So before somebody puts an
There we go.
application together to go before the planning board, they put together a package that goes to the TRC committee. So all of the comments that Luke has been referring to this evening were based on a very preliminary drawing showing 4 buildings with a comment of 70 units. Once that project came forward, he was made aware of the variance that was required. I can't speak for all of the department heads. I can speak for myself. The comments that were presented by me at that meeting were based on a very limited set of information that was presented to the TRC meeting. I would imagine that comments of do not recommend or otherwise are based on a lack of information provided at TRC. It was not project specific necessarily, but I can't speak for all department heads.
And for us, I mean, as I said in the beginning, we're kind of on a fact-finding mission here, and we don't know which facts are going to apply to the 5 criteria that we need to look at this as. So, we might get 300 facts, and we may end up with 6 facts that really impact our decision. Out of this, and again, I understand this is a very preliminary review. And looking at my site plan, I had this question earlier. If a density increase is permitted, I was wondering whether the fire department was okay with 1 equipment access for these 2 buildings, which much probably house, I don't know how many people in there, 50, 60, and whether that was going to eventually end up being an issue. And I think the plan's changed since he's seen it, but that issue is still there. So for me, I'm just going to make a note of that.
Could I ask a quick question related to that? It's really clear, especially when you showed us where all the stakes were this afternoon, where the 2 buildings on this side are located right there, ready access to Willow Street. Over on this side, there's one side of Blacksmith Printing is 26.79 feet, and the other side is 21.48 feet. Are these 2 little accesses on either side of the building the only way to get to this 3rd building, or is this 3rd building in some way going to be connected to a road going out to Willow Street? Because it's not shown.
Not at this time. The 2 accesses, I mean, that Blacksmith Printing building is pretty much surrounded by the mill property. That was the access point for that side. There is talk about a pedestrian walkway that is not the Bridge Falls path inside the development, but no development for vehicular traffic across the river.
And was the question ever asked of the fire department if their equipment can get in and out of these 2 appropriately? Can they swing in there, say, with a ladder truck if they need to? Did Tom get that question, or he maybe didn't because we have a new plan, perhaps?
Correct, possibly. I think that certainly that would come up again at site plan review, and I'm not saying it wouldn't. That would definitely be part of site plan review with the planning board. I mean, at the time when Tom looked at it in reference to that particular part of the lot, there was still 1 building on that parcel and 3 buildings on the other side. We call it all 1 parcel, but the Willow Street side. So,
Just a reminder to the board, even if the board were to grant the variance, the site plan you have in front of you is not set in stone. It's only conceptual to illustrate what the intent was. So if the board were to grant the variance would apply to density, but the plan would not.
I got to chew on that a little bit, but yes.
You mentioned the irregularities in your neighborhood. What did you use for a scale or a measurement when you looked at your neighborhood?
What do you mean by scale?
What do you consider your neighborhood as you describe it?
I consider my neighborhood to be
In a measurement?
in the measurement. I don't know what you're asking me to calculate exactly. Can you be a little bit more specific? In measurement.
Are you asking about what he considers the boundaries of his neighborhood?
No. Your concept of your neighborhood, not what's in it, but where is it?
The Wolfeboro Falls District? Is that what you're referring to? And the buildings that are there? Yeah, they other than the one building, which is the larger of the three buildings, the rest of the buildings fit very well in that area. Two are completely shielded from downtown Wolfeboro by the entire peninsula that's being left at the end of the Barry Miller property. The other property has enough elevation decline that when you drove past it on Center Street, you would see 1.5 stories. The rest would be set down lower. So in context of, if you're asking me, do I think that in size and scale, does it fit with the area? Absolutely. You have 6 apartment buildings within a square block of that property. It definitely fits with the property. And as being one of the only single-family residents in sight of it, I feel it definitely does. I wouldn't put something in my backyard that didn't fit in scalable in that size.
The second question is, I still have concern about Willow Street as to where it ends. This drawing that you gave us is far better, and thank you for that, with a lot more detail. However, it appears that Willow Street ends at the edge of Bridge Falls Path, and the road or the street does not continue over the path. So that needs to be clarified. The burden is upon you to do so. And when you look at the plan, it looks as though the way that, and you're familiar with it, public might not follow, but it looks as though there's kind of a jog that goes to a point on Lot 1. It almost looks like Lot 1 has maybe, what's the scale on here? Maybe has 5 feet of entrance, and as I say, Willow, and Lot 2 doesn't go down to Willow Street. So it appears that there is not a crossing that the town gave. There may be an easement, there may be a 20-foot right-of-way, but there doesn't appear to be a 50-foot right-of-way from Willow across. So that's one question. Eventually, I would hope that could be clarified. That's.
I have one question for Tavis. The Technical Review Committee, now that there's been some changes from the last meeting, do they take another hit at that? Because what I heard is a bunch of the department heads were having issues with it.
That's up to the applicant. The applicant can resubmit to the Technical Review Committee. He can also have a non-binding meeting with the planning board to discuss a layout.
Thank you.
For me, Audrey, right now.
Do you have questions, Sarah?
Not right now.
Okay. Tim?
I'm not seeing anything from Sabette.
So that's the full-size drawing over there, but it is hard for people to see it, and especially in detail. But even on these little drawings, I've outlined the setbacks to the shore and the property line setbacks. And White Mountain's done a yeoman job of sliding these 3 buildings into the only buildable places on this lot. So for those that can't see the lines, these 3 areas are it. There's really not much else you can do without additional approvals. You might be able to swivel one a little bit, but there's no other place to put these 3 buildings.
Audrey, Sabette just says she does have a question.
Okay.
My question is just, what is the actual length of Willow Street?
What is the what?
Length.
Length.
The length.
I don't think we know that. Do you know that?
I do not.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Do you have a follow-up question to that?
No, I was curious about a couple of things, and the length of the street would impact that, but no. I'd like to know that down the road.
Okay. We'll put a note.
Could I address her question?
Sure.
On the map that we have now, it says Willow Street note. There's a lot of notes on here because there's boundary lines and driveways and rights-of-way that need clarification. And on Willow Street note, it says Willow Street layout dated September 15th, 1863, from the town clerk record book from 1863 to 1869, page 11, does not give a distance for the final course of Willow Street, merely stating to the grist mill with quotes. For the purpose of this plan, the area of subject parcel tax map 204015 has been computed to the tie line as shown in reference 2. So it's kind of, it sounds like undetermined. It needs to be surveyed and further looked at.
Do you have something to add to that?
Not at this time.
Okay. So back to what I was talking about, the wetland setback and property line setbacks and placement of the buildings. Luke, I see that I think all 3 of the buildings, the parking garage level slab is very nearly close to the lowest elevation in the area that it can be built. For instance, the drive-through area of the buildings are at, the slab elevation is very close to what the natural grade is right there. And that's true, I think, of all 3 buildings. So if you're driving down to that lowest elevation and going into the parking areas, how do the people access the apartments?
Just for clarification, once again, I believe that question you're asking falls outside the purview of this zoning board with regards to a density variance. However, I will answer the question, just noting that as a statement. You know, we obviously to meet all ADA and all requirements, therefore, there would be elevators in these buildings, they'd be sprinkled. There would be, if you have a parking garage, it needs to be fire suppression in the parking garage. The walls need to be treated with, you know, any kind of fire suppression material. There would be interior entrances to the buildings. There would also be exterior entrances to the buildings. Is what we're thinking right now. We haven't gone into great detail on that because once again, we're trying to minimize how much money we spend on this application to get a density variance when there are so many other steps on the way to go.
So I guess I was kind of going backwards. I probably should have asked first. Generally, site plans show what the parking ordinance requires for parking spaces, and I don't see that on here. Was that done? Not what you're showing, but what the requirement for the parking is for the lot?
So my interpretation of the current ordinance in that zone would be one for every unit and one for every three. Using the parking underneath the buildings and the adjacent lot at the Oddfellows parking lot across the street, we can accomplish the necessary parking spots needed to accommodate the 50 units.
You said using parking spaces across the street, you're talking about across Route 128?
Correct.
And where would that be?
It's called the Oddfellows parking lot. It's on the map.
Is that not a town lot? I always thought it was.
And current zoning in Wolfeboro allows for that use. Is that correct, Tavis?
Yes, but I have to defer to the applicant's comment that that's really a planning board question, not a zoning board question.
Well, you know, I kind of thought it was, but all of the parking regulations are in zoning, so that's why I'm a bit confused about that.
No, my point for saying that is the applicant has contested two specific sections of the zoning ordinance and is not currently asking for a parking variance.
So in that case, wouldn't I expect to see all the required parking on the proposal?
I can't speak to what you would expect.
So then I would say that, you know, the number of parking spaces on the proposal don't meet the ordinance. I do have a question. Is that a town lot over there?
I don't know the ownership of the lot in question.
Okay. Yes?
It is because there was a court case relative to access to that by the Chinese restaurant a number of years ago.
So I guess relative to the density request, I'm really concerned that given the lack of detail in the building blocks not showing the circulation within the building, the handicap spots, things that take up spaces down there, and that there's no surface parking shown, and to my knowledge, parking off the lot for residential uses is not permitted. I'm very concerned that those haven't been accounted for within this density request.
I have a question for the planner. Have you ever had applications come in where the applicant said they're going to use off-site parking to count as their parking spaces?
Yes, there's a specific provision in the site plan regulations that the town adopted at the last town meeting that allows the applicant to work with the planning board on a parking management plan,
Okay. Thank you.
which I believe is referenced on the plan that's in the packet.
But that is in the zoning ordinance, not the site plan regulations, correct?
It's in the site plan regulations, the ability for a parking management plan.
Can we take a look?
Sure.
Because I know it's also in the zoning, so I'm a little confused.
It may well be, but the point is the planning board is the only one that can authorize a parking management plan or consider alternate parking plans. They can also grant waivers to the parking standards after presentation to the planning board.
So I guess I would like to take that under advisement because those sections are in zoning and it's not under the planning board section, it's in a separate section. That also indicates that that's not available for residential purposes. So I am really concerned about that, and I think we can find that answer later on.
I guess I go back to my original concern that since they're not requesting a variance, I don't know how it's relative.
It's relative because, in my mind, the density increase is taking up space on the lot, and they're not supplying the required parking, even if they get some kind of reduction, whether it's a variance or something else. The amount of density that's being asked for is taking up the areas that could be used for parking. So I think they're related. I could be wrong, but we will be talking and taking this under advisement to make sure that we're applying the correct criteria to the variance, the 5 variance criteria. So basically, again, this is mostly information gathering, trying to answer questions that we don't know the answer to. I think that's the only other thing that I'm concerned about and confuses me somewhat is, in particular, this building over on the Center Street side. The parking access is around back and underneath at the lowest part of that part of the lot. The other part of the building up near the walking track and towards the parking that's adjacent to the existing building appears to be almost exactly at grade at that floor level. And if that is at grade, I feel there might be a conflict with the zoning that requires residential units not to be at grade. It's really a little bit hard to tell without the details of these drawings, but that one is naturally in that place, and these two could be made to be that way and then would be in conflict with the zoning. I think that's it for me at the moment. Yep.
I used the scale that's on here to the best of my ability. I didn't have a ruler, but it looks like the building over on Lot 15, the single building, it looks like it's approximately 15 feet from the town trail. Tavis, do you know what the setback would be on that lot?
The effect of what?
I believe that's the
Setback,
setback line right there.
Between here
And what is the number required?
It would be considered a side yard as it doesn't front a street. So it
15
would be a
feet.
commercial
15?
setback of 0.
Okay, and then what would
Oh,
the,
it's a commercial setback of 0 on the plan.
Three or more units considered a commercial project would be a commercial property and have a 0 setback.
Okay.
I don't think it would go through the planning board with a 0 setback without some sort of a buffer or other protection, but that's.
well, you know, the planning board's going to have their day, and we're having ours tonight, so the questions are just to get some information
No, I
to
understand.
see where we're going with this. The other question, and I don't know the answer to that either, is there a requirement for the distance between the two buildings on Lot 1? And it looks like it's 17 feet. That's,
Did you scale that off?
well, I use a
Yeah.
piece of paper.
I believe it's probably 20 feet, so,
I used it from this corner to the building.
yeah.
Isn't that fire code?
What?
Isn't that
Yes.
national fire code?
I don't know, Tavis, do you know if there's a setback between two buildings on one lot?
There
because-
is, but it's typically dictated by fire code.
What is it?
I'm looking through the ordinance right now. I don't believe there
I
is.
think it's 20 feet, if I remember correctly.
Okay, well,
There's no setback between buildings called out in the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District.
could we give the public their chance and we'll have a second
I
chance?
have a couple more questions about, so obviously, conditions of approval would include your statements about the number of units that are workforce housing and the threshold for the earnings, and also the RSA requires that 50% be 2 bedrooms, and you're aware of that, and that would be something that would be a condition of approval as well. Does that put 2 floors of living on top of the parking, or just 1? Do you know?
2.
2 floors and a roof, or is that second floor under a gable roof or something?
That's the plan, to keep
That's
under the
the plan.
35-foot height ordinance.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said, Luke.
I said the plan was exactly what the chair stated about a gable roof or something like that, in order to keep the entire project under the 35-foot.
Open up the microphone to those in favor.
Madam Chair, I did put a sign-in sheet.
There's a sign-in sheet where, over here. Yeah, if anybody would like to speak, if you want to sign in there. So you'll be directing the questions to the board?
Hi.
Okay.
My name's Trell Hartford. I've been following this online and, in the backgrounds. I'm a local for 42 years here. Grew up in town, enjoyed the Berry Mill as a kid, watched it burn down all through the whole, so everything I've seen,
me too.
most of it. Couple questions. The lady that's in the video, her name's Sabbath Stroman, I believe?
Yes.
As you've looked over the comments through Facebook and all that, since this whole project began, she spoke negatively of the whole project throughout the whole process. And then all of a sudden, is part of the board. So how should she not recuse herself with, she's biased to the application to start with?
So our process for that, that's set by state law, is Sabette Stroman can say whether she feels she can be open to the facts in the case at this point, or whether she feels that she needs to recuse herself. Sabette, can you answer that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I did make some comments on Facebook, which I shared with Audrey before I agreed to be on the board. And I did actually, if you look back, they weren't comments, they were questions. I asked a number of questions because I honestly was very appreciative of this effort. And I was trying to just gather information for myself as a citizen of Wolfeboro. And so if you look back, there are questions. There was at one point when Nate said something about, I don't remember, but I said, oh gosh, I'm going to have to rethink that. And that's the extent of it. So I don't feel at all that I feel like I can be very open to all of the facts. And I've learned a lot more going through the application and reading your site plan.
Thank you. And
And
the second step we have is to have the board vote on whether we believe that she should recuse herself. It's a non-binding vote. The only person who can take somebody off the board is actually the court. So I'm going to take that second step and ask the board to take a vote whether they believe Sabette should recuse herself.
I don't think she would need to, based on what she said, but the public has to realize that even if every member of the board thought that she should, she can still decide to sit. So that's what the law says.
So what's your vote?
No, I don't think she needs to step down.
Suzanne?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to say that I don't believe she needs to step down. Tim?
Yes.
And Sabette's already stated that she feels that she can be objective. So that's the vote here. That's as far as we can go with it. Again, the only next step for anybody is to take that up with the courts.
She's a full-time Wolfeboro resident.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. I have one last question, I guess, or comment here. I guess it's towards Audrey. Reading some of the things, did you also message?
Can you?
Yeah. Did you also message Nate with some comments that said, frankly, that the town planner had a shitty attitude about his job and he is not competent of his job?
I did say that.
And you're comfortable sitting on this also?
I am sitting here hearing this case, which is not a case with the town planner.
Okay.
Thank you. Somebody else would like to speak in favor of this project? Would anybody like to speak opposed to this project? Please state your name and who you're representing.
I represent myself. This is John Sandine, Wolfeboro resident at 6 Wyanoke Gate Lane. I guess that doesn't work. I speak in opposition to the density variance because it is not in the public interest in the long-term character of Wolfeboro. The public interest is served by an open, complete, and transparent presentation of the plan before the ZBA. The application is not properly documented, and it does not reveal the complete scope of the project. The density variance should be rejected for lack of specificity. Page 10 of the standard ZBA application requires a complete plan of the development, highlighting 12 characteristics. Page 10 is well known to the applicant, who is an elected member of the ZBA, and he has recused himself from voting on this matter, but he's not recused himself from speaking in favor of this density variant. The survey mapped by White Mountain Survey shows important points about this development of 50 apartments and the matter of the density variance. But it is not a complete development plan, and the application itself is meager. My first objection, the drawing shows 3 buildings squeezed into ridiculously small areas that are the only possible areas not encroaching on the required setbacks. The placement of the 3 apartment buildings is not architectural design. It is the only viable option. That's why this second version of the plan is reduced from 4 buildings to 3. There is no 4th building site on lot 15 and 17. The first 4 80 by 84-foot buildings, 70 apartment version of this plan, as presented 2 weeks ago, is not viable based on the setbacks, and it never was viable. This application seems to be bait and switch. You have no fixed plan on which to judge this application, only verbal comments. 2 weeks ago, the ZBA board voted unanimously to ask for design drawings. No design drawings are provided for this hearing. If you approve the density, then the application, because there is no design documentation, will change to a 3rd or a 4th, who knows what, iteration as it is brought before the planning board for more variances. What the survey does show is that there are no roads surrounding this building. Each building has only a single 20-foot driveway to the underbuilding parking area. 1 driveway in and out for 17 or 18 apartments is ridiculous. A UPS truck parked in the driveway would stop auto traffic. Roads around the building are necessary for the construction of the building, snow storage, exterior maintenance, trash collection, deliveries to the occupants, visitors, medical emergencies, and fire safety. There are no exterior roads needed to fight a fire in these buildings. You cannot fight a fire from under the building in the parking area or park more than 1 fire truck on a 20-foot driveway. Clearly, this plan will not be approved by the Wolfeboro Fire Chief. Even though the buildings do not encroach on the setbacks, the next iteration of the plans will show these encroaching essential roads. These necessary roads will cause much larger deforestation and increase runoff of stormwater by delineating the numerous required setbacks. The lot sizes are surveyed to be 1.7 for 15 and 2 acres for lot 17, which includes several small unbuildable islands. The 2 lots equal 3.7 acres, not the 4 acres stated in the application. Those are the facts. Including on the drawing are the outlines of the 3 proposed apartment buildings showing how they might be placed on the land. The drawing shows the elevations of the slabs of each building at 515 feet. That's the floor of the parking garage. It shows the first finished floor level at 525 feet. White Mountain surveys land. It does not design buildings. Because the land survey is not a building design, no other elevations are shown. Are these buildings 4 or 5 stories? Does the height of any building exceed the zoning height regulation of 35 feet? The answer is obvious, but not declared on these drawings. Yes, they will exceed 35 feet, but that question is not answered in any design document. The application is lacking in disclosing the height of the apartment buildings. To reach the requested density on these small footprints, the construction must go up, and each apartment will be tall, much taller than any other building in Wolfeboro. But they won't tell us now. An approved density variance tonight means tall apartment buildings on this property and sets a density precedent for 5- and 6-story apartments throughout Wolfeboro. The building footprint of Building A, the one closest to town, is 6,200 square feet. The footprint of Building B is only 5,050 square feet. The footprint of Building C near the blacksmith printing is 5,350 square feet. Each footprint is smaller than the original 80 by 80 proposed 6,400 square foot buildings. These footprints are drawn to fit the setbacks rather than designed to be the final buildings. This is a cut and fit plan, a wait and see if we get a density approval, and then we go for other variances as needed. And as Tavis just mentioned, this plan is only conceptual and will be changed. The applicant says that all the apartments will be 600 square feet, so they can tell us that the building will be 3 stories. Does anyone want to live in a 600 square foot apartment? That's 20 by 30 size motel room. Are these apartments for singles? Obviously, no family wants to fit into an efficiency 1-room bathroom apartment. Let's think realistically about the heights of these buildings and take Building A, the largest one, as an example. 4 tiny 600 square foot and 3 small 1,000 square foot apartments total 5,400 square feet with 2 stairways, heating, air conditioning, elevators, and utilities. That fills 1 floor. With that layout, each floor can house 7 apartments. To build 17 apartments in Building A requires 3 floors. With parking on the first level, Building A reaches 4 stories, and with a pitched roof, will reach a height of 50 feet, each floor being 10 feet and the roof being 10 feet. Well above the zoning limits. If the proposed apartment and condos are larger, then a 5th floor is needed to fit 17 apartments and condos per building. Building B and C are considerably smaller than Building A and will require 5 floors. To picture a 5-story building, imagine a fatter Avery building downtown, the yellow building, with another Avery building on top of it. Now picture 1 50-foot and 1 60-foot Avery apartment tower placed on the property between Bridge Falls Path and Back Bay, reaching 60 or 70 feet above Back Bay. Picture another 60-foot Avery apartment tower right behind Blacksmith Printing on Center Street. Now you have a picture of this proposed 3-tower apartment and condo development. Allowing this type of density on Back Bay will change the character of Wolfeboro forever. My third objection: how can cars How many cars will 50 apartments generate, and how many trips in and out each day? What unspecified, not included roads will emergency vehicles use? Can the fire department reach all parts of the property in emergencies? Can Willow Street support the additional traffic flow from 35 apartments? What accommodations are planned to resolve the serious safety hazard posed by 50 apartments' car traffic turning into and entering onto Route 28 near the curving junction of Route 109A? No solutions are presented about any of these issues on the survey or in the development application. In conclusion, the variance application is not properly documented, does not transparently reveal the complete scope of the project. The applicant's density variance appeal must be rejected as contrary to the public interest of Wolfeboro. Please save Wolfeboro from a rash of future 5- and 6-story apartment towers and keep Wolfeboro the beautiful town we all love. Thank you.
Sir, could you please write your name down?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Did you want to submit that statement to the record, or please give it to Tavis?
Thank you.
Mr. Murray?
My name is Roger Murray. I'm a property owner on Back Bay. We do now finally have a site plan, but as John Sandine has pointed out, there are critical pieces of information that are still missing. We don't know what any of these buildings will look like. We don't know how many units will be in each building. We don't know really how tall they are. I think it was a statement there would be the parking and 2 floor of apartments, but we don't have any figure on what that totals. But this is not a referendum on workforce housing. There are 2 provisions in the zoning ordinance that address workforce and affordable housing. Section 175-28, inclusionary zoning, has as its purpose to encourage and provide for affordable housing. Section 175-27.1 provides for affordable workforce nonprofit housing. The applicant is not submitting this application under either of these. Rather, it is an application under 175-145, the town's multifamily dwelling ordinance. And the application is for 50 multifamily dwellings, of which 35 will be workforce housing. Addressing the criteria, the variance will be contrary to the public interest. The survey that was sent out in preparation for the recent master plan asked people what their factors were in moving to Wolfeboro. Number 1 was Wolfeboro's rural character, which was deemed very important by 56% of the respondents and somewhat important by 29%. The survey also asked what actions the town could take to manage development. First was preserve scenic views, which 80% said was very important. 17% said somewhat important. In second place was preserve open space. 71% said that was very important. 23% said it was somewhat important. Next was preserve historical buildings. And after that was control lake and shorefront development, which 73% said was very important, and 21% said was somewhat important. Back in the 1980 master plan was a question about what people like most about Wolfeboro. And the answer was the rural small town character. And that has been consistent in every survey and every master plan since. That's the answer that always comes up. The current master plan in its future land use chapter, community character recommendations, has as number 3, new development and redevelopment should be compatible with Wolfeboro's character from a site design, scale, and architectural perspective. This current proposal is none of those. Due to the discussion that is taking place about potential projects and the impacts on the town water and sewer system, Dave Ford sent a January 7, 2022 memo to the town manager and board of selectmen. Addressing the sewer system, he said there was a calculation of about 40,000 gallons a day of capacity available, and stated, this allows the town to have organic growth within our sewer system in accordance with current zoning. However, one large project could use up future allocations and should not be considered without a plan for expanding the town sewer capacity, which means additional effluent discharge. In terms of the water, he said there was approximately an 80,000 gallon per day capacity. This will allow for organic growth within the water distribution system. However, any one large project would have an impact on this allocation. And I do have copies of those 3 items for the board.
I'll write to Tavis, thank you. I had asked Tavis to give me a 3-minute timer when we started, but I haven't used it yet. Just keep in mind that a lot of people would like to speak.
I am aware of that, but it is necessary to address all 5 criteria, and I will try to do so as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
As has been pointed out, the footprints of these proposed buildings are considerably larger than the footprint of the Avery building. These 3 large buildings squeezed onto the property are not in the public interest. They will negatively affect Back Bay, the Bridge Falls Path, and all of the essential character of the neighborhood. 2, the spirit of the ordinance will not be observed. The applicant is seeking to build 50 multifamily dwellings on the 3.7 acres, which actually includes the non-buildable islands. 6 units per acre are allowed in this district. He is proposing a density of 13 units per acre. On a property with limited buildable area, as is shown on the site plan, due to poorly drained, very poorly drained soils and the setbacks from them. The second variance, and there are 2 variances that are under consideration here, wants to expand, to put 50 multifamily units in 3 buildings when 6 units per building are allowed. This is 16.67 units per building. We don't know how many units will be in the building, what the buildings will look like, or how tall they will eventually be, but we do know that they will be large, and if you approve that variance, you're improving the placement of these large buildings on this site. The left-hand building, which was referred to as Building A, its footprint is 1/3 larger than the Avery building. The other 2 buildings are each more than 1,000 square feet bigger than the Avery building in terms of the footprint. Contrary to the assertion by the applicant, workforce housing is not exempt from density requirements of the zoning ordinance. The inclusionary zoning, affordable nonprofit workforce housing, and the multifamily dwelling ordinance all have density requirements that have to be met. In terms of the state statutes on workforce housing, RSA 674-59, workforce housing opportunities provides in every municipality that exercises the power to adopt land use ordinances and regulations, such ordinances and regulations shall provide reasonable and realistic opportunities for the development of workforce housing. And then goes on to say, This obligation may be satisfied by the adoption of inclusionary zoning as defined in RSA 674:21, Roman numeral 5A. Section 175:28 of the Wolfeboro zoning ordinance satisfies this obligation. Mention was made of the Boscia case. That was not a use variance. That was not about whether there should be 60 or 100 units in the hotel. The question in that case was setback variances. So it had nothing to do with the number, size of the proposed building. In this case, the applicant is not asking for a slight deviation from the provision of the ordinance. They're seeking a variance to allow more than twice the number of units allowed per acre, and a second variance to allow almost 3 times the number of units allowed per building. Basically, they're looking for zoning by variance. These variances would significantly alter the essential character of the neighborhood. 3, substantial justice will not be done. The plan shows 52 parking spaces, as has been pointed out. Under the zoning ordinance, 67 parking spaces are allowed, and as I think as the chair pointed out, under section 175-130 of the zoning ordinance, it does state that off-site parking is not permitted for non-residential, is only permitted for non-residential uses. Based on the amount of poorly drained and very poorly drained soils on this property and the setback shown on the site plan, there's no place on the property where 15 additional spaces can be located. The proposal is too intensive a concentration of large buildings next to Back Bay and the Bridge Falls Path. The gain to the town by denying these 2 variances will outweigh any loss to the applicant. 4, the value of surrounding property will be diminished. The issue here is not affordable housing. The issue is, would this multifamily development squeezed onto this property diminish the value of surrounding properties? I believe it will. The application contains some general information about affordable housing, references California, North Carolina, but nothing is specific to this property. The burden is on the applicant to provide evidence to substantiate that the project will not diminish the value of surrounding properties, and the applicant has failed to do so. 5, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would not result in unnecessary hardship because the special conditions of this property that distinguish it from other properties. The property consists of 3.7 acres with extensive water frontage. There are few structures, but it's essentially vacant. There are more options for developing this property than any other property in the area. That does not constitute a hardship for zoning purposes. A, owning to special conditions of the property set forth above that distinguish it from other properties in the area. 1, a fair and substantial relationship exists between the purpose of the ordinance applicable to the application and the specific application of the provision to the property. The purpose of the provisions of the ordinance at issue here is to regulate density and the size of buildings and to prevent overcrowding. This project is exactly what those provisions are intended to prevent. 2, the proposed use is not reasonable. 13 plus units per acre where 6 are allowed, 16 plus units per building where 6 are allowed is not a reasonable use. The hardship needs to be due to the special conditions of the property, not the applicant. There's no basis for granting a variance to make economically infeasible development viable, nor does the fact that there's 35 workforce housing units alter that. B, given the parcel's size and extensive water frontage, there are any number of ways the property can be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and a variance is not necessary to enable a reasonable use. because the application does not meet any of 5 criteria, the 2 requests for variances should be denied. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody? Question?
Yeah, can we have a copy of that?
It's my notes. And I don't think you want to try reading my handwriting.
Hopefully it's recorded. So. Somebody else would like to speak in opposition?
Yes. My name is Mary Langer. I'm here with my husband, Gregory Langer, and we're here to supply some comments and concerns, and I'm very pleased that many of the comments already have addressed the same issues that we have and used similar examples. And one of the first concerns I have, and it may not be a concern, is that here we start out at 70 units for the variance, and now we're down to 50. And I'm wondering, you know, shouldn't the application have been also amended to go along with the plan that's being presented? I don't know the answer to that. It just seems to muddy the waters. Question is that on the zoning where you have the 3.7 acres and you're allowed to have 6 per unit, shouldn't zoning take into consideration the actual usable land required to adequately support the allowed 6 units to start with? I'm not sure if that, you mentioned something about density and calculations. I would think that it should. Again, we've got wetlands, and this is Winnipesaukee Shoreland Protected Area. How is this development going to get a permit through DES for the shoreline protection? That is, when we're also an owner of the Sawmill Marina condominium unit, and in doing our dock reconfiguration, we had to go through all the shoreline stuff. So this would not, as far as I can see, be exempt from any of the DES shoreline protection requirements for setbacks. Again, I'm not sure. When it comes to variance will be contrary to public interest. Okay. It'd be a major stretch to allow 18 to 22 units on that parcel, never mind the 50. The applicant may be unique, but so is the Back Bay. The Back Bay and Bridge Falls Path are truly gems for the town of Wolfeboro. The 2019 master plan on page 74 states that, with emphasis added, the town's economic development policies must consider the importance of the greater downtown area as a center for economic, civic, cultural, and tourism activities, while equally considering the high value placed on protecting the area's natural, physical, and historic features, as well as the pedestrian-friendly nature of the area. Who wants a developed Manhattan City block on the Back Bay? The variance would jeopardize the natural and physical Back Bay aesthetic features. The Back Bay provides recreational activities and essential habitat for beaver, otter, mink, muskrat, turtles, geese, ducks, visiting loons, bald eagles, and osprey. Back Bay, again, is part of the shoreline protection area and needs to be protected from excessive, harmful, and unsightly development. Upon review, the code officer indicated on the application that it was affordable nonprofit nonprofit workforce housing, which it is not. This is extremely misleading on the application, and it should be corrected and to be stated in the records to become part of the minutes of the meeting. To me, it creates misleading information. Spirit, that's already been addressed as far as the intent of the density and for workhouse forcing as to whether or not zoning allows it. I'm not going to repeat what was said. Based upon substantial justice, based upon the area size constraint, the proximity to wetland and shorefront, and physical and environmental constraints related to these parcels, the granting of a variance to allow almost 3 times the density allowance per acre will far outweigh any possible benefits to the public. The parking in general downtown area of Wolfeboro is at a premium. The site is so constrained
that the new plan proposes parking in the first level of the buildings. Even then, it does not provide for adequate amount of parking or the number of proposed units. The businesses along Center Street will lose available parking in front of their establishments to overflow parking from the housing. Value of the surrounding neighborhoods. And again, this has been brought up. Where's the study showing that this location and the impact on the surrounding area? Again, the area is unique. How many workforce housing developments front on Lake Winnipesaukee shorefront? Applicant states that research suggests neighbors should have little to fear from this type of attractive and modestly sized developments that constitute the bulk of newly produced affordable housing. With the amount of usable land under consideration, the proposed density is not modestly sized. I did provide an exhibit where I imagined what the...
Travis, I'm sorry, excuse me. Are they live or are they having a problem?
I don't have anything to suggest it's not live.
Yeah.
I don't know what's raising the question.
Brian Deshays went up there to make a comment, so we were just wondering whether it wasn't being broadcast.
I can't speak to what Brian's doing.
I'm sorry? Okay. We'd appreciate it if anybody notices that they're not broadcasting, because this is our record, so thank you. I'm sorry.
I was pleasantly surprised that some of the comparisons were the Avery building and block, and I took the Google Earth and superimposed the Avery building on the site, and then I added, which I didn't know how many stories were going to be, I added another story on top of the Avery building for a 4-story building with parking underneath to give a visual effect as to what it may look like since there's no plans. All of this was presented to the town, to the zoning office for you to have. So there is some, and there's also information on the shoreline protection setbacks. I'm not going to rebeat a horse that's already been shown here, but again, no traffic impact has been performed. The increased traffic from Willow Street can be hazardous to people utilizing Bridge Falls Path into the Route 28 traffic flow. Adequate parking cannot be achieved for what they're asking for. Again, nothing's been addressed for snow removal, trash pickup, the attractive design. What will be in place to protect the public from the view of the multi-story buildings from the scenic Bridge Falls Path? It's likely that Willow Street will need to be upgraded for safety purposes, and I question who will be paying for that. Okay, and again, the emergency vehicles, that was already previously addressed. My husband and I feel that workhouse housing is important, but we also believe that it should not be at the expense of the wetlands, waterfront, and the natural and scenic beauty of the area. It appears that the workhouse, the fact that its issues appear to be more about being able to make money and not necessarily the public benefit of workhouse housing. If it's not financially feasible or economically sustainable due to site constraints, perhaps the applicant should be looking for more adequate parcels of land. Harriman Hill is a prime model to be followed when it comes to workforce housing in Wolfeboro. And again, we don't feel the development of this size is appropriate for location. 18 to 24 would be. They'd be within the ability of the zoning, and we feel that that would be unacceptable. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And I understand that you've already turned in documents to the town clerk.
The entire document,
Thank
yes.
you. Edie?
I wish I'd known before you take the documents, because I've been making notes and writing all over this. I've spent more than 20 years in community education, promoting and constructing affordable housing in Wolfeboro. I'm certainly aware of the critical need in our community and in the state, and I also appreciate the importance of respecting local zoning and environmental protections. No one, I believe, is arguing about property values, about the lack of need, about desperately needed housing, about it's about the environmental and mixed use what we are really talking about here is this site appropriate for such density? First, the Wolfeboro boards and committees do support workforce housing. It really upsets me when I hear people saying that you don't, that this town does not, because you do. It has been identified in master plans for years, and years ago the planning board established a subcommittee and assigned members to work with community leaders to address the situation. And that's what Harriman Hill grew out of. They supported nonprofit activities to provide community education. They reviewed the Wolfeboro regulations and supported enabling changes. And those changes passed the town meeting by more than 2-to-1 votes. The whole community has never been against workforce housing. When Harriman Hill was proposed, the town planner and director of public works guided the housing coalition through the planning, zoning, and state permitting required. All runoff, as required by the state, had to be contained on site. And even though we were high on a hill, we were more than a quarter mile away from Back Bay, we had to put in 2 drainage ponds to catch all of the drainage that came off the roofs. The state held us fully accountable, as did the town, to meet all environmental and local regulations. It took years to complete, but as permitted, when the 20 purchase option homes are completed, Harriman Hill will provide 68 units of nonprofit workforce housing in a quiet neighborhood close to the town center on 35 acres, including extensive conservation land. Children can play safely, and the environment has been protected, even the vernal pools and drainage streams that enter Back Bay. It also provides recreation for the tenants. It fits with the values and quality of life in our community. The issue here is the location and the density. Again, it is not that we don't appreciate and everybody doesn't support workforce housing. This location endangers the sensitive environmental balance of Back Bay from construction blasting, disruptions of past industrial wastes, adding extensive impervious surfaces from the roofs, walkways, and parking lots, adding drainage and into sensitive wetlands. How will it come out in the archaeological confirmations? We had to prove that there were not indigenous people activities in the Harriman Hill area because they were believed to have been summering in the area of Back Bay. And some of these things, they come from the state. It is not from the town. The Bridge Falls Path is only about a half-mile long, and it's a treasure for our community that attracts a steady stream of walkers, walking children and dogs and cyclists. To put a road crossing through it, I believe would be awful. The traffic pattern with 109A and 28 feeding into Wolfeboro Falls with the rail trail, museum, the businesses, is already a very dangerous situation. The size and scale of these buildings don't fit in with our Lakeshore Community Village scale. What would the visibility be? It may be hidden from the road as you're driving by, but it's certainly not hidden from the park across the bay or from downtown looking along the bay. I also wonder about the quality of life in the units with so many packed into so few buildings. How can there be natural light and air to all the rooms? Where are the children going to play if all the usable land is for parking lots and for the buildings? Workforce housing is a critical need, and it can be well done in Wolfeboro, and Wolfeboro will support it. We don't have to destroy our fragile environment that we love. It can be done right. This isn't NIMBY, it's common sense. It is absolutely critical for the acceptance of the community and protection of our environment to support the responsibilities of our elected ZBA and Planning Board, because they do support what is proven to be appropriate, but they also must not support it if it is not warranted. So.
Ma'am, could you please state your name and sign too, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Edith Damaris.
Thanks.
I've been a Wolfeboro resident for 55 years, first on North Main Street, then on Clark Road, and my children were raised here.
Thank you.
Are you going to be submitting any documents?
You really want this?
That's totally up to you. We have it on recording. You can give it to Tavis.
Thank you. You made it up.
I mean,
3 tries.
after a few tries, you were counting. Good evening. And for the record, my name is Lenore Clark. I am the chair of the Wolfeboro Conservation Commission, and I am here to read a prepared statement that was approved unanimously by the commission. We are seriously concerned about any proposal to develop multifamily housing on Back Bay that requires zoning waivers. A request for a zoning variance is a request for an environmental variance. Zoning regulations exist in no small part to help protect the local environment. Higher population density has direct negative effects on the nearshore environment. Studies have found elevated concentrations of contaminants in lake water with increased building density. The Lake Winnipesaukee Association states, nutrient overloading is one of the major threats to the lake. Activities that disturb vegetative cover to develop land and cause erosion generate significant sediment and nutrient pollution loads that move from the landscape into the lake. Elevated levels of phosphorus have already been measured in Back Bay in recent years. Developing this parcel may exacerbate the already existing milfoil problem that the town has spent years and taxpayer dollars to fight and/or cause future cyanobacteria blooms. Wolfeboro Waters and the Lake Winnipesaukee Association are conducting a watershed study of Wolfeboro Bay, which will include Back Bay. It will include a build-out analysis analyzing water quality and its capacity to assimilate pollution load from the landscape, and run models that estimate pre-development, current, and projected future amount of phosphorus entering the bay. The Wolfeboro Bay results should be published before any zoning-related decisions are made in this area to better understand the repercussions of these decisions on the lake. The applicant states that the land has significant ledge and wetlands restrictions, which will make development more difficult. Other concerns we have include, and the first is definitely the foremost for us, blasting at an old mill site with legacy chemicals in the ground and management of the associated contaminated muck pile, degradation of the view from Front Bay Park directly across from the project location, added stress to drinking water supplies and wastewater treatment capacity, potential for sewer pump failure, as happened already at the neighboring Railroad Museum, spread of invasive plants and shrubs from earth-moving equipment, further loss of undeveloped shoreline and associated wildlife and pollinator habitat, increased boat traffic, and application of salts and chemicals to treat driving surfaces in inclement weather and storage of associated snow piles. The second sentence of Wolfeboro's master plan vision statement says, Wolfeboro is a community that is sensitive to and protective of its natural environment, particularly its abundant water resources. A page 1 graphic shows spokes on a wheel surrounding the hub of Wolfeboro's vision. Each spoke shows different goals, including diverse housing options on one, and a rural landscape of clean, healthy, and intact ecosystems on the next. We submit that the spirit of the zoning ordinance strives to achieve balance between these two valuable but sometimes conflicting goals. Chapter 175 of the ordinance states, this chapter is specifically adopted to preserve air and water quality, to conserve open space, and to protect natural resources from degradation. It is the position of the Wolfeboro Conservation Commission that the spirit of the ordinance is being subjugated by this variance request. We urge the applicant to seek an alternative location for this otherwise worthwhile project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have questions?
Do you want to submit that document?
It's already been submitted.
The document was sent to Tavis on Thursday, I believe.
I forgot, we've got that.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Brenda Jarrett, and I live on Longstack Lane in South Wolfeboro, and I'm speaking on behalf of abutters at 90 Center Street, Jesse Schwimmer and Izzy Parkinson. Their letter has been sent to Audrey and Tavis, and you all will have access to that. I'm just reading into the record some of the highlights of their opinion as abutters of this project. 90 Center Street directly abuts the proposed development and is within 20 feet of 15 Willow Street and nearby 17 Willow Street. 90 Center Street has 3 sides next to 15 and 17 Willow Street. It is next to the Bridge Falls Trail and located directly on Center Street. 3 units, as has been mentioned, are in there: 2 businesses, Blacksmith Printing, Salon Allure, and 1 long-term rental unit. Parking and street access, 2 sides of the building are used for parking, not including the street parking that's available. The rear loading dock area at 90 Center Street is used daily for commercial activity, including UPS pickups, drop-offs. Additionally, trash and oil deliveries are managed from the very back of the plot. The density variance is contrary to the public interest. The negatives associated with allowing a dense development next to Wolfeboro's most important environmental resource, the lake, and on plots of land 15 and 17 Willow Street with poor public and private access combine to be drastically against the public interest, even when considering the good provided by potential workforce housing. Tenant safety. The proposed development would add 50 units to the 3.7 acres of land behind 90 Center Street, which, according to the Institute of Traffic Engineers, would result in 500 additional vehicle trips per day to the area. A single-family residence averages 10 vehicle trips per day times 50 equals 500. Currently, the only way to access any development on 15 Willow Street is through a 16-foot driveway between the Bridge Falls Path and the south side of 90 Center Street. Patrons to businesses at 90 Center Street park perpendicular to the 16-foot access. Additionally, the driveway to access 15 Willow requires a left turn when driving onto 109A Center Street and going north from Main. Vehicles attempting this left turn can block the pedestrian crosswalk connecting the Bridge Falls Path across Center Street, exacerbating an already dangerous intersection, as we've heard tonight. As stated, and as we've heard, the proposed development would drastically increase the number of vehicles parking and frequenting the Bridge Falls Path area. Given the extensive pavement that would need to be laid without much setback from the water in order to accommodate parking and public services for these 50 units, there will be no way to manage stormwater runoff, bringing vehicular and building pollutants directly into Back Bay and then into Winnipesaukee. Currently, the lack of pavement allows for runoff to filter through multiple levels of soil and rock hundreds of feet from Back Bay, preventing pollution. In terms of the spirit of the ordinance, the density variance is not in the spirit of the ordinance when considering the negative impact to the area, including increased traffic and traffic safety issues and environmental pollution. The density variance at around 90 Center Street would result in less available parking adjacent to 90 Center Street, leading to lower rents for businesses and the long-term rental. Public and private service access would be restricted, trash, oil, plumbing, mail delivery, etc., to reach the building, increasing service costs. Businesses will not be able to attract as many as customers. More people living densely across 3.7 acres at Willow Street behind 90 Center Street will increase noise levels. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the density ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. As the owners of 90 Center Street have stated, increasing density to 18 units per acre to support 50 units on the Willow Street plots with poor access would create unnecessary hardship for the surrounding Wolfeboro Falls area when considering adverse environmental impacts and pollution from traffic behind and around 90 Center Street. While workforce housing is part of the master plan and is needed, the density required to build on 15 and 17 Willow Street per the proposed development application is not remotely feasible. Sincerely, Jesse Schwimmer and Izzy Parkinson, 90 Center Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maggie Steer, 314 Center Street, Chair, Wolfeboro Heritage Commission, and I do have copies of my remarks for you, and I also have a copy of a historic map of the property, just for your information. Workforce housing is a widely acknowledged problem, but I don't believe that this is the only possible solution. The charrette that was referenced earlier focused on the area of downtown and Laner Street and identified potential workforce housing opportunities in that area, but did not look beyond that further out of town. So I just want that clarification to be in the record. As Roger Murray said earlier, Wolfeboro citizens have consistently voiced their support for maintaining our rural, historic, and small-town character. In the 2019 master plan, there was a commitment to manage growth and change in all town decision-making processes to honor our historic character and encourage its preservation. The Heritage Commission works to meet that goal. We are opposed to granting the requested variance because this is one of the most significant places in the history of our town. We believe that the criteria for a variance have not been met. First of all, is it in the public interest? Preserving our heritage is a stated goal of the master plan, and that's in the public interest as well as workforce housing. Here are 3 aspects to consider. Preservation of Wolfeboro's mill heritage. These parcels contain the stories of mill history going back to the founding of our town. In the 1760s, when the best mill site in the area, was set aside for essential sawmill and grist mill. Over time, this became the heart of Wolfeboro industry and manufacturing, including blacksmith shops, a machine shop, railroad depot, and buildings where boxes, beds, piano stools, building materials, and excelsior were made, surrounded by log yards and served by the railroad and complemented by small stores and a post office. Enjoyment of the Bridge Falls Path. This entire 12-mile railroad corridor has been determined eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, and every year thousands of people enjoy the section of trail from downtown to Center Street, created 40 years ago in memory of Russell Chase. In another 10 years, the Bridge Falls Path will be National Register eligible, worthy of protection in its own right. The proposed development could severely compromise the integrity of this resource. 50 housing units, traffic crossing the 1872 rail corridor would irrevocably alter the powerful sense of place and experience of history here. Third, there is, as Edie Damaris mentioned, a high probability of Native American resources in this location. Numerous fishing encampments have been documented where rivers enter the lakes of our region. Protection of this heritage and the potential to learn more about this history is also in the public interest. Criterion B, the spirit of the ordinance is observed. We disagree with the argument that this proposal would create development that better complements the surrounding neighborhood. The Wolfeboro Falls Business District zoning was created to provide professional, institutional, cultural, limited retail activity, and mixed commercial and residential uses, just as it was historically. This outsized complex does not advance this vision of compatible small-scale multiple use and would overwhelm the small village feel and character that the zoning was intended to encourage. Criterion D, We believe that the values of surrounding properties would be diminished. The application claims that this development offers the property a chance to come to life once again, but other scenarios could do that without such a variance. The surrounding neighborhood, with the notable exception of the Wright Museum, is made up of simple, well-kept 19th century buildings, relatively uniform in size, materials, and scale, and crowned by the elaborate mill owner's house on the hill. This mill village complex and identity should not be sacrificed. The remains of the multiple mills, the dam, falls, water view, and open space are major assets of the site and have a very real impact on the value of surrounding properties, value that would be lost if this variance is granted. For these reasons, the Heritage Commission cannot support the requested density variance. It is not in the public interest, does not meet the spirit of the ordinance, and compromises surrounding property values. We do support balanced growth that honors and protects the historic character of Wolfeboro Falls as set forth in the master plan and the current zoning, and we encourage the town and the developer to seek alternate locations for their project. Thank you.
Please give that to Tavis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My wife and I each wrote a separate letter about different issues.
Could you move the microphone a little closer to your mouth, please?
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
identify yourself, please.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm going to try to shorten each of the letters so you guys don't have to hear all the stuff. Anyways, my name is James Degnan, and I'm a property owner on Back Bay. My property is 40 feet from the subject property, so literally a stone's throw away. I've got many concerns about the health and safety of future residents of the housing development, as well as questions about Back Bay and Lake Winnipesaukee and the environmental impacts. So a lot of the previous speakers touched on items that I was concerned about, so I'm going to try to limit this to new things that are in my letter. And I think some of the most important things that I see as concerns are the multiple waste streams that went into Back Bay historically, from the sawdust from the mills and the sewer discharge from the pipes over decades. All that's sitting in the bottom of Back Bay, and that is definitely a concern as that degrades. And also Foss Field, which is on the other side of the site. That's a landfill that's registered with DES, but there's not much for documentation. I haven't found any documentation on it, actually, so it's surprising that you have a landfill in the middle of a town that doesn't have monitoring wells near it, that I can find anyways. I'm concerned about residents there having issues with vapor intrusion. It's a common problem with landfills. So without having monitoring, knowing if there's a possibility of vapors going from both the sawdust degrading and the landfills. Oh.
You're drifting. You're drifting away from the microphone.
Yes.
That might extend.
It's very loud right here, and the
pull it
speakers
out.
are focused.
You can pull it right out of the...
All right, great.
Or move the stand over to the side.
Yeah, there might be a
if that's
better place to speak for acoustics.
No
Anyways,
such thing.
yeah, with the sawdust in the bottom of the bay, over time it degrades and the situation becomes anoxic, and anoxic conditions can mobilize metals in the sediment, toxic metals like arsenic, manganese, and other metals like iron. And it's a possibility that that's going on in the bay. The other problem with the sawdust is you have gases building up from the anoxic degradation, sulfide gas, which is poisonous, and methane gas, which is explosive. So you've got that going on in the sawdust. Every time the atmosphere changes pressure, you can see bubbles coming out of Back Bay. So any development that's proposed near the bay, you've got to really be aware of what's going on with possible vapor transport and gases. Most of the buildings on the bay that are near where the sawdust is really thick, where the bay was historically deep, are pretty far from the water. So there hasn't been any documented issues with problems, but this property out on the peninsula, near some of the deepest parts of the historic bay before it was filled in with sawdust, is definitely potentially near where vapor pathways could impact it. So yeah, between the metals and the gases, that's a big deal. And the other issue that I foresee is blasting. I've done a lot of work on blasting in the past. I'm a hydrologist. I work for the government, and I've worked at waste sites on and off over the past 25 years. So I've had some experience with different waste, landfills, and blasting. And when you blast near the water table, the blasting compounds can really quickly go into the water and get dissolved in the water and then get transported with the groundwater into nearby surface water receptors. And one of the major components of blasting compounds is nitrate. Ammonium nitrate in fuel oil is a pretty common component, so that nitrate would directly impact the bay and Lake Winnipesaukee if it was transported with the groundwater. The other problem with the blasting is opening up additional vapor transport pathways in the rock, and possibly mobilizing other contaminants that might be at the site. We don't know what's at the site now. I haven't seen a site investigation, but from what I see of the history, we had sawmills, an unknown amount of wood treatment, if any. There might not have been, but wood treatment at sawmills. Historically, they've used creosote and mercuric chloride through kyanization. And I actually struck a creosote timber out in Back Bay with my boat. It smelled like it was really fresh creosote. So I haven't seen a lot of that, but that is a possibility of historic wood treatment there. And of course, the machine shop that's shown on the historic plan that they had at the Clickety-Clack Museum, the Model Railroad Museum, that's also a possibility for possible waste with the chemicals that they use at machine shops. So between the blasting and the two former landfills, those are my biggest concerns. And I've got a letter from myself here that I'll give to you that goes more into detail there. And I also have a letter from my wife. She couldn't be here tonight. She's watching the kids and working. She's got to work pretty late tonight. But anyways, her concerns were really, they had to align with the master plan. Just the fact that this section of Wolfeboro Falls is really a gateway to Wolfeboro. So when people come in from Ossipee or Conway, it's the first thing they see when they come down the hill, down 28. So they would see these large buildings. Luke has assured me that they would be less than 35 feet. So I had questions, though, looking at the size. How could you really have that size building with reasonable living space? When I was single, I lived in a 600 square foot apartment for a number of years. And when I met my wife, it just didn't work. So I'm not sure how that can really work.
Can I ask you, you said you lived within 40 feet of the property. Are you an actual abutter?
I'm not an actual abutter, no. I'm just to the east of the property.
I was just looking for your name on the abutter list.
Oh, yeah, if you're looking for the name, it says it in the letter. My name,
Yep.
James Degnan.
I believe we have that.
Amy
Yep.
Fortier. So in the tax record, it's listed as Titania's Myrtle. So that's the LLC that we bought the property with. We are both sole owners of the LLC. And we bought it with the LLC because it's a commercial property, so we use it for commercial purposes.
Gotcha.
So with that, I'm not going to read these letters end to end. It's 7 pages, but I do have a number of questions at the end that I think are important to answer. And of course, they all touch on the major topics there.
Can you please give those to Tavis if he doesn't already have them?
I did email them. I didn't get a receipt, so I'll give them to you just to make sure. So basically, in the letters, I'm looking to see what there is for information on the landfills and.
We're not going to be able to go into depth with your letter right now. We have probably 35 or 40 letters that we need to read,
Okay.
including yours, and then possibly we can address your questions.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I would hate to see this be approved and just be a gateway to to really stir things up. Back Bay is recovering from decades to centuries of waste disposal. Over the years, 30 years ago when I came here, it looked like the sawdust was just a thin blanket.
I
on the
really
bed.
have to cut you off because we're approaching kind of the end of our time, and there are other people that would like to speak.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Mal Blodgett.
You might want to extend that or move it to the side so that you don't have to hunch over in order to get it close enough.
My name is Mal Blodgett, a longtime resident of Wolfeboro. I'm here on behalf of the Land Bank of Wolfeboro-Tuftonboro, and we just have a quick statement, so maybe I'll even be under the 3 minutes. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Closer to your mouth, please.
Okay, sorry. So here on behalf of the Land Bank of Wolfeboro-Tuftonboro, the Land Bank of Wolfeboro-Tuftonboro does not support this variance. For over 20 years, our organization has supported workforce housing, including Harriman Hill. It is our position that this variance request does not reflect a reasonable or responsible use of this land. We ask that this request be denied. And speaking just for myself, just a couple of things that I noted tonight, and one is that as far as I understand, the economic hardship, the hardship criteria should not include economic hardship. Is that correct, or am I wrong in that?
There is a component of economic hardship.
Okay, so I might be mistaken in that. Mr. Freudenberg mentioned that the 3.7 acres, because it's larger than adjacent lots, in my mind, does not seem like a hardship. I think, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Could I have a raise of hands of other people who would like to speak tonight? We're trying to determine what our timing is going to be. Would you like to come? Are you in opposition or in favor? Thank you. We may not be able to hear you with the mask on. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. So I do apologize. My name is Catherine Burke. I am the adjacent property owner, the abutter to the property on the waterfront. And I do apologize if for whatever reason, which kind of concerns me, is that I was uninformed of this project. I heard it through, a back source. So my impression was that I was supposed to be formally notified. So I do apologize in advance for not being more properly prepared and being able to submit something in advance for your review and consideration. But with that, given the short amount of, very, very short amount of time I've had to prepare, I felt it was necessary for me to do my best. So excuse me if I'm a little frank with some of these comments that I have. But first and foremost, I understand that, there are a set of criteria that we need to, that determines whether or not it's worthy of moving forward. Being a young individual and having recently purchased property in Wolfeboro, which, let me tell you, it was not easy, I couldn't be happier. It was my dream come true, and I'm right next door to the anticipated project location.
Can you tell us, do you know your tax map And map and lot number, by any chance, give it to Tavis?
I do apologize. I don't have it off the top of my head.
You guys can get together later and.
Absolutely, definitely. I was hoping to reach out to him in advance, but there's a lot. You know, I wanted to kind of wrap my head around the project first and at least be able to come here and speak, you know, to the best that I can for the purpose of specifically the density variance. You know, while I'm new to the environment and to the community, I'm thrilled to be here. And you know, prior to this, I still do. I have a long career in heavy civil construction, working in New York and Boston. I have a big background in deep foundation work on, you know, environmental health and safety. That's specifically what I manage. And, you know, so with that, I think it's fair for me to speak to this project because this will be a large, heavy civil construction project. And with that, you know, I have a variety of, you know, certifications that being an Envision environmental professional, you know, one, it's almost like LEED, but for heavy civil construction. Essentially, we expect projects of this size to have some positive impact to the community. And I know we're not there yet. The purpose is for density, so I'm not going to go into it that much, but currently all I can see are just negative impacts to the community. However, with that said, I do, especially as a young individual, single individual, I think workforce housing is absolutely critical. I have a 4-family property. I have tenants of my own that I care for very, you know, I respect them, I take care of them, and you know, I think the adjacent property owners, you know, feel the same. So don't get me wrong, I think workforce housing is absolutely critical. Do I think this is the proper location for this sort of project? Absolutely not. Who's to say in the future with the site plan, maybe that'll change. I think there's a lot of creative things that you can do. I've worked, like I said, doing multi-billion-dollar projects where in urban areas where, you know, environmental impact to the community and to people, you know, surrounding those projects is absolutely critical, and on a much larger scale than this. So I can already kind of forecast the problems that could arise if this project is not, you know, overlooked and overseen with great scrutiny. But with that, I will, you know, when it comes to workforce housing, I think we all agree. We are in support of it. Unemployment in Wolfeboro is 2.9%. I know personally from having to vacate some tenants that lived in town due to them having a dog and my homeowner's insurance not permitting that. I unfortunately had to vacate them, as well as for me to occupy the property. I will say that they lived and worked in town, and so naturally you would assume, and I think a lot of people are assuming, that these, you know, these potential tenants for the future will be using Bridge Falls Path to access their work locations. That may not be the case, okay? The tenants that I had to unfortunately vacate would drive into town, so maybe a 5-10 minute walk, and they would drive. So I think what I can say with just firsthand knowledge, and I'm not sure if this is public knowledge, but the variance will actually be in violation of the easement, which was, you know, conditional upon the purchase of my property, which states that incoming traffic for residents is through between 94 and 96 Center Street. So therefore, 94 Center Street, my next door neighbor, all of those tenants come through my driveway and then they park in the back. And we are then, you know, per the easement, advised to leave between 90 and 94. Okay, so this easement states one-way traffic between 94 and 96, which makes sense because you wouldn't want people exiting that way because you're going right into that very dangerous intersection of which we've all discussed. So it makes sense. But therefore, we've got a problem now. If that is going to be incoming traffic, that then is going to majorly impact the traffic pattern for the tenants for 90, 94, and 96. So I can share that easement with you so you have that on file. But I will say that first and foremost, when we talk about contrary to the public interest, I don't see all of the individuals that I think this project is for and would support. And my guess is because although it was shared on a public platform, I was never informed. So if I was not informed and I'm a direct abutter, I suspect it's not because they're working right now, it's because they weren't unaware. That's just my personal opinion, but I think this room would be a lot more full. So it's hard to say whether we're truly going to get the opinions of the public interest, given the lack of notifications that I believe should have been required. And with that, being both a part of the public and as well as being a direct abutter, I will say that I've been told by the post office, unfortunately, perhaps this is why I was never notified, but I've reached out to the post office numerous occasions to see if they would service my property, and I was told that it was an unsafe area for the couriers to access. I didn't receive any further information other than that, but I suspect it has something to do with typical fleet traffic patterns that are very actively managed, when you think about, FedEx and postal routes. They try to make it as safe and easy as possible. So clearly there's already concerns that have been addressed and been discussed amongst the community, to which I'm still trying to understand myself. But when it comes to the area behind 90 to 94 and 96, I mentioned that the violation of the easement variance for access, and also I want to point out that contrary to public interest, I'll just tell you right now, my property is built on old fieldstone. I've done some significant heavy civil foundation work in the past, so I know the risks of foundations failing, and I can tell you right now, the brick that was built upon the fieldstone that supports my four-family structure will likely fail if blasting is required. So I'm going to point that out, that my house might be floating in Back Bay. Spirit of the ordinance being observed, I think the spirit of the ordinance, there's plenty of other properties that I think this project would be better suited for. This would be more appropriate, in my opinion, if there was an area that needed immediate, workforce. If we had a new development, a large-scale development project where we couldn't get individuals to come to Wolfeboro to work. That, to me, I think would be the spirit of the ordinance, is that, hey, we need workforce housing to support this new facility. We've got a 2.6% unemployment rate, and, I'm not going to speak to where all of those individuals are living, but I've had to commute 2 hours to get to work. That's not fun. But a 20-minute commute into Wolfeboro, in my personal opinion, is not out of the question. But I do also understand everybody's situations are different. So substantial justice is done. Alternative locations are available. I fully support the intent of this project. I just feel that justice to the history and the conservation of the natural resources should really take precedence. I'll tell you, the reason why I put in an offer on this property was because I was told a family of bald eagles lived behind on Back Bay. And just the other day, for the first time, I saw one, and I was so enthralled. I was so excited, and I can tell you right now, bald eagles don't like drill rigs. They don't like heavy equipment and machinery.
I'm sorry, we really have to stick to the 5 points.
Okay, I just want to point out that substantial justice, I think, is both for the applicant and for the town and the community and everybody's time. The values of surrounding properties are not diminished. I will tell you right now, from having had several appraisals completed, my property will negatively be impacted for certain. Why? Because it's a 4-family residential. Anything 5 units or more would be considered commercial. So the property directly next to me, 94, that's both mixed use, residential, and commercial. So commercial, taking the lead on that. So therefore, they maybe wouldn't be impacted, but my residential real estate value would be. As well as any other 4-family or less units would be negatively impacted. And that's specifically because the appraisers are going to use sales comps. They're never going to look at this project and say, it cost however much money, so your house is worth this much. They're going to look at comparable sales comps. So they're going to look at other 4 families. So it will negatively impact my property. And literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. So as it currently stands, for the respect of the applicant and for the respect of the resources that are going to be required to have this project come to fruition, I think that's the hardship, in my personal opinion. Currently, there is no hardship. If we're saying it's workforce housing, I don't see that. I don't see any evidence of that. I think the hardship that's going to be endured if this density variance is approved will be upon the applicant and his partners and to all of the abutters and to the town as a whole for having to increase water and sewer systems, provide for safe access, pedestrian vehicular access for the tenants. And there's going to be a lot more things down the road, specifically that the town is going to have to come up with to support the density that's being proposed here. So while I do support workforce housing and development of the land, and I think conserving natural resources and truly the history of the town really does take precedence and should be strongly considered. So again, I do apologize for not being better prepared. I was kind of did my best with the very short and little information I got, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For a minute, I thought it wasn't on. It being 10:15, and nobody else immediately wanting to speak, unless, Luke, do you want to have a last word in opposition? We are going to keep the public hearing open. But at this time, we have a lot of material to review.
Just so I could close out my time, because I don't think we'll be speaking again after this, but a few things. I'm going to be very brief because I know everyone wants to go home. It's late. 22 units. That's how many units that we could build as high-end condos on that lot with the building permit that we could procure from the town of Wolfeboro. 22. That would need potentially no zoning. We'd go to planning board for site plan review. They'd put conditions on it, and we could build 22 units on that land. That land is sat vacant and on the market for over 3 or 4 years now. It's been on the market over the years for the last 15 years, since I was a kid. We shouldn't be coy about this. This was a mill. It was a rather large mill at the time of operation. It operated up to the 1970s. I know it has a lot of cultural and heritage significance. But right now, what it is an attractive nuisance for people in town. Anyone that's walked by it in the last 6 months notices the graffiti all over the building. If you've been inside of it, you'll notice the alcoholic beverages, the frequent police visits, the potential usage of drugs inside the building, and all over the property. So it's not some pristine environment that is, being, meticulously taken care of by the people of Wolfeboro. It has a lot of cultural heritage and a lot of significance, but it does have a way forward. What is this all about? As some people will say, this is not about workforce housing, but it really is. It's about, I don't want that there. It's about, I don't like that there. And those are great arguments, okay? But that argument would come up no matter where it was placed in town. Harriman Hill, they couldn't meet the requirement and had to ask for a reduction to 50% of the units being affordable. That was the hardship. So as for an economic hardship, we only need to make the same hardship as Harriman Hill did. So that argument's off the table to me. It's nice to say you support workforce housing, but we actually do. We chose not to build 22 units. We chose to go ahead and say, where does Wolfeboro stand? Does Wolfeboro really believe in workforce housing? Because this is a great opportunity for it. All those things that were just laid out, this is exactly what people have been asking for. The poor people, the people that are workers in this town, the people that come into this town and operate our restaurants, that are our LNAs, that work in our hospitals, that are fire and police, those are the people that workforce housing serves. And anyone who's been in Wolfeboro this past summer notices how many restaurants are closed. Don't think that's just a part of COVID. It's a changing in times. And if you don't have workers and you don't provide housing for them, then there's no place for them to come to. This facility would provide that. And as for these buildings being giant, 5,000 square feet for each floor, let me just tell you, we live in Wolfeboro, okay? And there's a lot of people, even some sitting in this room, that have houses bigger than 5,000 square feet. So, and those are not enormous buildings, okay? They are tastefully done. And anyone that says that they wouldn't live in 500 or 600 square feet, well, I think they should maybe rethink who they are as a person. Because this is exactly what the fight is about. Workforce housing is not only needed, it is important. It is vital to any local economy. It is vital to any local community. A few other points. Within hours of setting up the website for the Barry Miller project, within hours, we had over 100 applicants. 75 of those applicants that were interested in living in these 3 buildings were in the Governor Wentworth Regional School District. 75. If that doesn't speak to need for workforce housing, I don't know what else does. And it's nice that people are offering potential other spots. We've looked all over. When you talk about water and sewer infrastructure, when you talk about walkability to town, and why shouldn't workforce housing be on the water? Is there a problem with workers being on the water? I don't think so. I think it's a great spot for it. It's been underutilized. It's been on the market. It has great infrastructure. It has water and sewer, easy walking distance to town, a mile of the hospital, a mile of the fire station. It looked like a no-brainer to me. So that's where we are. We stand for the workers, and we'll keep coming back time and time again until this is done. But 22 units, high-end condos, could be built there, no problem.
I have a question. Have you filed any paperwork or made any written contact with the New Hampshire Housing Authority?
What do we have for people? Yeah.
Really brief. Good evening.
Name, please.
I know it's kind of late. Yeah, but Sean Cooper, and I'm one of the partners in the project. And we have contacted New Hampshire Housing. We have met with New Hampshire Housing. We've had a meeting with New Hampshire Housing. Us personally, they toured the site with us in the fall and looked it over, and we are in constant contact with them.
And then I have another question, and that is, you have cited on the criteria of number 5, little enforcement would prevent this project from moving forward as it would limit the project to 24 units, which is not sustainable for the infrastructure costs that need to be expended to develop the property. And further, you say that a strict conformance is required, that this project cannot be sustained at 24 units, and thus the entire project collapse. 70 units allow the development to not only be economically viable, but the project to develop it also economically sustainable. And 50 units, I correct myself there. So have you done a financial analysis of this, or a study of this that supports that statement?
A formal study, no. It's, you know, it certainly came up in our meetings with New Hampshire Housing. As you may or may not know, New Hampshire Housing, they manage the funds, or they manage the program actually for HUD. And you know, so that's New Hampshire Housing Finance's role in this. So they do look at the cost of the land, the cost of what they think construction might be, and the cost of any other related costs, which, you know, is substantial in a project this size. And they do, you know, that's something they would look at more closely when we actually apply for financing. But they did give us some guidance on that. So we do have a general idea about where we need to be to make it viable at all.
Well, whenever the ZBA is processing an application that has declared by the applicant as workforce housing, the ZBA must apply some economic viability analysis. And I don't think it's unreasonable for this board to request something from you as to support your substantiation that it would collapse if you didn't get that number of units. And I'd like to know how the board feels about that.
Well, I appreciate your position, but I'm not sure that's something that, as a zoning board, would be a concern to you of what, you know, our financial, you know, situation would be to, could we bring this, you know, to fruition or not. You know, another thing that obviously we have to consider is that 50% of those units are going to be rented out at
that microphone.
50% of the units by law, right, will be rented out at less than market rate. So you can't just look at it as, well, they're going to get, you know, $2,000 a unit. Half of those units will be around half of that, you know. So the rents are greatly reduced, which of course makes it economically tougher to pull the project together from a financial basis.
And that's your argument for asking for more density. So I think what we're kind of looking at is, you know, how did you find that magic number? You're asking for more density, so we understand that a lot of the units are less than market rate, which is why you're asking for the density, and to kind of show a pro forma of what you expect
Correct.
that to happen.
We know we're going to have to cross that bridge for financing at some point. Because New Hampshire Housing Finance, if they look at it and they don't like the numbers, then they're not going to support the financing.
I understand. Yeah. They're very competitive also.
Yeah, oh, they are for sure.
Well,
Yep.
at some point, I think we need that. Rather
We
than,
might. We have a lot of information to sort through and discuss what, you know, what the elements of the density variance are that we need supportive documents for.
I'd like to give them some guidance as to what it is we'll be looking for, because it seems to me that we won't be closing this hearing tonight. There's
No.
too much information to be digested, too many questions to be answered. And I think that one of them that concerned me again was how they figured scientifically, engineering-wise, the density that they're saying that they can get these units. That was one of my questions. The right-of-way question is an issue on Willow Street. And my big question is how they can substantiate their statement that it will be an economic hardship if they don't get their 50 units. And I think we're within our statutory right to ask for that.
It was a statement that was made in the application, so.
It was twice stated, if not more. So I think that that is one of the things, and then we would take that information, that written information, and send it to a professional consultant that the town, Tavis, would find for us or use. And it's very much a system that's done within planning board when they need a second opinion about a road or something. And get a professional consideration of the economic hardship. We don't have that now. Tavis.
Just going to comment, I don't know if the town has anyone on retainer that would be able to evaluate
You could find somebody.
an economic pro forma, but I do think the board has the ability to ask for it.
Ask for it. A pro forma could be pretty straightforward, and if we felt it was not understandable by us, we could have somebody else read it to us. And
I just
explain
mentioned
it.
that because for the planning board, it's typically a civil engineering drawing of some sort, and you can hire a civil engineer to see if.
Well, I maybe used the wrong example, but I think you know where I'm going with this.
I do.
I see what you're asking for, but I look at it that either, with all the things that have been said, both positive and negative, if you're for the program, whether the cost is advantageous to them or not, you're either for it or against it. I don't know if the money comes in because they're saying that's a hardship. Is this a good for Wolfeboro and a community with the pluses and minuses having to do with everything that's been stated here tonight? So with all that, if there's all those negative things that we heard from people tonight and they come back with a pro forma that says, yeah, we need 50 units to make this happen, does that make you swing your vote to yes? You may already be a yes, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the ability to make a reasonable profit is something that they almost have a right to with the ask for a variance. So that's, a reasonableness, and if they're looking for 50 and their profit is unreasonable, we could perhaps say, maybe you could do 35. I mean, that's how I would look at, what I would be looking for the pro forma, or it would substantiate that, in fact, they really do need 50 to make this project,
So you would base your whole decision on profitability?
No, it's only one of many.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Tavis?
I have a question. We've got somebody online, I believe is one of the partners, and I'm going to leave it to the board as to they can speak or not. There's somebody online that is a partner of the applicant, and I'm asking the board if they're willing to let that person speak during the applicant time.
I was only willing to let the board member remotely under 91A. I don't think it's appropriate to, unless we've invited the entire general public, which we haven't.
I understand.
Okay.
I allowed the person in because they said they wanted to be able to listen to the meeting. Now they're asking to speak. I'm having the board make a determination, and that's fine.
Audrey?
Yes.
God, no, I forgot what I was going to ask you, because I waited so long.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Talking to
It's
your
getting
microphone.
late.
Well, if we were to continue the meeting, or the hearing, it would be wise to have a list of the outstanding issues relevant to density that we need for the applicant to respond to.
I was hoping that the applicant was taking notes as we were asking questions, but because I do have questions about how they're going to meet the parking requirements, and I have questions about whether there's going to be residential on the ground floor. And those are two really important things to answer now or later.
Did Tavis did you take any list? Did you write a list?
I did not take a list. The other thing I'd remind the board is you have a number of written comments that you might want to have time to review and reflect on before coming back. So there may be, even, I'm assuming the applicant took a list tonight, but there might be more of a list that comes out of a continued hearing on the 14th.
I agree. Yeah.
I agree. There are a lot of things that come into the density, and I'm concerned about, does any from the school district ever go to TRCs? We have, and I know because I've counted them going by College Road that I come out of, 22 buses that go by at 2:30 in the afternoon, and they go through that intersection. And they also go through in the morning, but there's a concentrated, when they leave en masse, and there's a lot of safety things having to do with the density that, it's the buildings, but it's everything that's generated in those buildings that spills out into the community and causes a problem. And so there's several things here I think we still need to look at, and it's not fair to the applicant either to rush through and not look at all of them.
Yeah, I think we should each take the information and, sharpen our pencil and get our the things that we needed to answer.
One other thing that would be helpful for me is with the technical review committee, now that there's been a lot of additional information that's been supplied, do you think Luke would be able to turn that over with that group before the next meeting?
I don't believe so, no.
Because that was one of the things I was basing my questions on, is that there were a lot of negatives in there.
Well, in a perfect
departments
world
within-
with a project the size, the non-binding planning board route would have been very helpful because they could have identified a lot of the things that we're asking. I understand that it's thousands of dollars to go before them, some few thousands. It's, it's not binding. It's not a formal hearing. That would be a place that could bring up a lot of these questions so that we would have more information when it came here. But that wasn't done, so now we're trying to kind of, find out what it is that we need to know in order to apply the 5 criteria.
Yeah, we understand, and I think all the concerns that you and everyone in the public has tonight, they're valid and they make sense, and we anticipated all of those. But, the reason we approached density first is that we know it's very important, and for us to go forward, and put more of our financial resources forward, we need to know we can, get over that hurdle first. All those issues that you talked about that we agree are important and valid will be addressed by the planning board, 90% of them. And if we don't make those criteria, the project doesn't get approved. So it makes sense, but that comes later, not now.
With all due respect, I don't think my 2 concerns come later because they would come back as variance requests, which is fine.
Which is the parking and the first level.
And
correct?
oftentimes, things go to the planning board and they come back with other variance requests. I just want to get that information out because I think that is likely to happen with those.
Okay, so those are your 2 ones that we should address prior to coming back to the next meeting.
From my point of view, that's kind of my,
We certainly can do that.
Audrey, I'd like to make a motion to continue the hearing until our next regularly scheduled
March 14th.
March 14th.
I just throw it out there. This is up to the board. If board members want to think about the comments you made tonight and get a list to me by the end of the week, I can get those to the applicant. I would caution that it probably has to be something you already said at the meeting that you enumerate, but if there's something
a preliminary list, yeah.
Right.
So we could talk about that
Yeah.
after.
Do I get a second for continuation?
But just depending on where that list goes, they may want to extend beyond March 14th. That's why I was
Sure,
bringing
they can
it up.
always do that.
I'll second her thing.
14th, time and place, here in the town hall. It would be the second hearing, I would imagine, because we'll have no frontage hearing first.
It would be just like tonight's agenda.
Okay, 7 o'clock.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have to do a roll call because we have Sabette.
Sarah, yes.
Suzanne, yes.
Audrey, yes.
Tim, yes.
Sabette?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there.
Have a safe trip home. I hope it's not bad driving.
With regard to minutes.